Good afternoon, good evening everybody. Hope you're all well. I call on Reverend Nick Andrews to say a prayer. Thank you.
Our prayers will consist of 3 silences and then 2 said prayers at the end. And in the first silence we reflect on our own concerns and the concerns of those whom we love, those who are dear to us. And we offer them to God. And in the second silence, we reflect on those burdens that have been placed upon us, those things we've been asked to do, those things we've been asked to say, and we offer them to Almighty God. And in the third silence, we reflect on the items on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Those things that worry us, those things that are important to us. We offer them to Almighty God. Eternal God, in whose perfect realm no sword is drawn but the sword of righteousness, and no strength known but the strength of love. So guide and inspire the work of those who seek your kingdom, that all your people may find their security in that love which casts out fear, in the fellowship that you share with us. Amen. Almighty and eternal God, to whom we must all give account, guide with your Spirit all who work for good in this town, that we may be faithful to the mind of Christ and seek in all that we do to enrich our common life. Amen.
Thank you. Please take a seat. If members wish to remove their jackets, by all means, please feel free to remove your jackets. May I remind the members and the members of the public that the meeting will be streamed live on Webcast from the Oldham Council's website. And could I remind everybody to switch their mobile phones off, please? Otherwise, every phone that goes off is a £10 donation towards the Mayor's charity. Okay, so we'll move swiftly into public questions for Cabinet members. The first item in the Open Council Public Question Time question has been received from Cabinet members of the public, and questions will be taken in order they've received. So the first question is from Mr. Mohammed Uddin. Recently the Council approved the expansion of North Cheltenham School at the cost of £3.5 million. North Cheltenham School was chosen ahead of Hathershaw College, citing additional refurbishment costs. But this wasn't detailed in the report, nor was it scrutinised. In the Manchester Evening News, it was reported that the Council took 75 seconds to come to this decision, expand North Cheltenham's, which clearly indicates that, that adequate scrutiny was not offered to this decision. The PAN number at Chadderton School is 240 compared to 210 for Hathershaw. Despite this, Hathershaw College was not prioritised for expansion. The parents of copies are frustrated that most of their children are excluded from attending Hathershaw College, as priority is given to the feeder schools. Will the Council seriously look into the expansion of Hathershaw College in the immediate future, given the acute shortage of secondary schools placed for the residents of Coppis? I call on Councillor Jacks to respond, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Uddin, for raising the question. Forecasts show that by September 2019, an additional 110 places will be needed in Year 7 and subsequently across all of the year groups. By the year 2022, there will be 150 places needed in Year 7 and subsequently across all of the year groups. If the trend follows the primary school projections, then the additional places will be needed in Chedderton and East and West Oldham. There are a number of schemes that have been discussed and scrutinised at the Education Provision Group, which seeks to address the pressure and satisfy the demand in the borough, ensuring our statutory duty of providing sufficient school places is adhered to. The opportunity to extend existing secondary schools has been evaluated using the secondary schools priority matrix. The matrix takes into account a number of criteria, including the percentage of first preferences, requests at Year 7, allocation, Ofsted ratings, progress and attainment results, and site conditions and the capital cost per pupil place. Using this criteria, the priority for school for expansion at the current time is North Chadderton School. The Radcliffe School and Hathershaw College were the next priorities according to the LA expansion criteria. These options were looked at and analysed. The amount of places needed in West Oldham warranted more than could physically be put on the Hathershaw site. There is a new free school opening in East Oldham in September 2020, Oasis Academy Leesbrook. There is also the possibility of a new school in West Oldham in September 2022, which is currently being investigated and the site selection process is being undertaken. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Move on to the next question. The next question is by Said Maruf Ali. The residents of Coppis, Primrose Bank and other areas of West Oldham desperately need a good, outstanding secondary school in our area, following the closure of St Augustine's and Grange School. Schools census stats from January 2017 show minority ethnic pupils now make up 46.5% of the primary school pupils in state-funded Oldham schools and 39.8% of public pupils in state-funded Oldham secondary schools. According to Oldham Council's 2018 profile document, just 22.5% of the Oldham population is BME. The majority of the BME population lives around the town centre. There is a shortage of secondary school places due to St Augustine's School and Grange School being reallocated to Royston Shore and Chadderton areas. Also, the number of foreign-born children in Oldham schools increased from 318 pupils to 2,471 in just 4 years. The National Insurance figures released for January to March 2018 show another 530 adult migrants arrived in Oldham, with 77% settling in Oldham central wards. Is Oldham Council going to build a secondary school around town centre base to address the shortage of secondary schools places? There has been expansion of secondary school in other areas. However, due to individual school admission criteria, residents of Primrose Bank, Coppis does not have access to those schools. Based on the statistics, that the priority of Oldham Council should have been to build another secondary school in town centre base or expand the existing town centre base school. Why hasn't this been done? The Cabinet member responsible for education needs to address the lack of choices for schools for children in Coppis Primrose Bank area. It is an issue that is not serious concern for many. It's an issue that is a serious concern for many parents in Coppis. So I'd like to call on Councillor Jacks again for a response. I think it will be a similar reply to the previous one, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Ali, for raising the question. I do believe the response to the first question covers all the points raised in the second question, so I have nothing further to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll go on to the next question. This is submitted by Peter Brown by email. I call on Mr Brown to ask the question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question is for the full Cabinet. What is the role of the Leader of the Opposition to that of his councillors and to the electorate? And what should we, the electorate, expect from his answer? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, sir. This is to Councillor Fielding, please, if you could respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Brown, for your question. The role of the opposition is to hold the council and the executive to account, and the role of the leader of the opposition is to provide leadership to that group in the same way that I provide it to the Labour group, which forms the administration here at the council.
Thank you, sir, for the reply. We'll move on to the next question. The next question has been submitted by Mr Stephen Kenyon via letter. I made a complaint about Councillor Gloucester for breaching many of Oldham Council's codes of conduct. A standards assessment subcommittee decided on 22nd of March 2018 that no further investigation was required. I then asked Paul Entwistle, Borough Solicitor, how come they came to this decision as many codes of conduct had been breached. Could I please see Councillor Gloucester's response? I was then sent an email stating that Councillor Gloucester has declined to provide his response on this occasion. I asked again, how did this committee come to find that the breaching of many of the codes of conduct doesn't need any investigation, and may I please see Councillor Gloucester's response? I again call on Councillor Fielding to reply, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The standards complaint that was submitted by Mr Kenyon has gone through the proper process of assessment. It's not appropriate for the leader to be...
Excuse me. The question's addressed to Councillor Gloucester.
It refers to Councillor Gloucester, but the question has come to me and I'm responding. I'm going to continue the response, Mr Mayor. Is that okay?
What's wrong with openness and honesty? Transparency. And transparency. Where is it? In Oldham. We as citizens of Oldham, we deserve better.
These questions are to the Cabinet members. So, if you'd like to continue, please.
Okay. I will continue the response because this is Leader and Cabinet question time. I'm sure that if there's a question for Mr Gloucester, he needs to be approached directly and not in this area because he's not a member of the Cabinet, nor is he a leader. So the answer, if you'll allow me to finish the answer, Mr Kenyon. It's not appropriate for me as the leader to become involved in a standards process, and nor is it appropriate for me to comment upon individual members.
Excuse me, sir. Could I ask you to refrain from comments, please? Let the gentleman, please. Okay.
That's your answer.
We'll move on. We'll move on to the next question. Thank you. Next question is submitted by Barbara Caffrey via email. Why do the council not collect combined contaminated bins? I've been complaining for months on there has been at least 10 in my alley that have been behind Belgrave Road. Could I ask Councillor Shaw to respond, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question. The council actually do collect contaminated bins, but as a last resort, because we prefer to work with residents to ensure they fully understand what can and cannot go into each bin before removing them. And officers over the several previous years have continuously visited Belgrave Road, but despite our best efforts, there remains to be issues there. They went again last week and will remove again within the next 10 days.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question. This has been submitted by Phil Howarth by email. Please can the councillors of the Medlock Vale ward investigate why the damaged play surface on children's playground next to St Martin's School has been ripped up and replaced by sand? Is this sand going to be covered by a new play surface? This will be dangerous if left as sand due to existing concrete bases being uncovered, dog fouling, broken glass, used needles being hidden in the sand. Are you ready for lawsuits that will ensure this? Councillor Shah, to respond again, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Over a number of years, the play items have been vandalised and the safety surface has been repaired numerous times, but now needs to be removed as it was causing trip hazards and is unsafe. all the foundations of the play items being removed before sand, which is actually recognised as a safety surface, was installed to the depth of 300 millimetres. The sand will be raked once a week along with the other sand pits across Oldham. The site has gates to prevent dogs from accessing the site, so we do ask residents to ensure that they do not allow their dogs into the site to maintain that safety.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. The next question is submitted by George Kay. Why have St Mary's Ward elected members not held clinic surgeries for face-to-face meetings with members of the public in their ward during the past 3 years, nor do they advertise such in the limited editions of the Oldham papers? Can I ask Councillor Fielding to respond, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So it's for each member to choose the method that they feel is most appropriate for engaging with the communities that they serve. In some cases, this is ward surgeries. In other cases, it's street stalls. In other cases, it's something completely different. And in the case of St Mary's, I believe the reason that ward surgeries have been chosen not to be held is because that attendance has been poor at them, and they found that more effective use of their time and a better way to engage with residents is some of the other ways that I've described.
Thank you, sir. Next question, again by Deborah Barrett, by letter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is, like Sean Fielding does not agree with the north-south divide with Manchester and Oldham is forgotten, can the council tell me what the constituents can do about the ward councillors forgetting or ignoring parts of their ward in Medlock Vale?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Barrett, for your question. Thank you for your acknowledgement of the work that I've been doing in the media and at Greater Manchester to try and redress the imbalance between the north and south of our conurbation. On the part of your question about the ward in particular, which I assume you live, I'm afraid that coming from the position that I'm in, I find it difficult to accept that there are any members that willfully ignore or disregard any part of their ward. And I'm sure that subject to a reasonable approach, they will be willing to work with any residents that have concerns about investment or time spent in the area. Thank you.
Can I just respond to that, Councillor Fielding, if that's okay?
Unfortunately, Madam, you can't. We just need to go as the questions printed, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Where's the democracy in that?
We'll move on to the next question.
Should be the fundamental principle behind everything councils and other government bodies do. A new right has been introduced by the Openness of Local Government Bodies 2014, which enables members of the public to know.
Excuse me, sir. Could we just continue with the meeting? And thank you very much. Thank you.
You're only a resident of the election.
Next question has been submitted by Mrs A. Coleman via letter. So if councillors are not fulfilling their roles, they are voted into. What do we do about this? Councillor Fielding again, please. Thank you.
If councillors are not fulfilling their roles, then the process is that you make a judgment at each election about whether you feel you are being best served by the people that have been elected to represent you, and you vote accordingly in those elections.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the next question, which is submitted by Brenda Hatton via email or via letter. Could the law be made so councillors can only represent the wards they live in? This will surely make a marked improvement in caring about your area. Again, Councillor Fielding, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As people in this room may be aware, it's not even necessary to live within the borough in which you seek election. If you own a business or you work within there, you are able to stand for election within a particular council area. I'm confident in saying that I don't think that there's anybody that sits here in this council chamber that doesn't live in the borough. Certainly not any elected members that don't live within the borough. With respect to a law being made so that councillors can only represent the ward in which they live, that's not a decision for Oldham Council. that would be made elsewhere at a national level.
Thank you, sir. The next question is by Mark Birchall, and I believe Mark's here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's some documented photographic evidence I think Sean's got. Just a quick brief background. I've lived in Medlock Vale for over 50 years now, and I have sat on the NDC for 9, which I found a very successful thing which took place. But Athershire has always been one of the most deprived areas in the country. We have now a crisis occurring right under our very eyes. Only one councillor, Raymond, has come to our aid, but as you can see from the photographs, parts of this area are slowly declining to slum level. This is one of the many social issues which needs addressing in this area. This situation is totally unacceptable and we feel abandoned by the council. Therefore, the residents would expect a response from Leader Sean and MP Jim you need to discuss this at Cabinet level. Will you please look into this matter and discuss as a matter of urgency?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Councillor Fielding, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Birchall, for your question, and thank you for the photographs. I don't know if the correct phrase is thank you, because it doesn't make, it's not something that's very pleasant or easy to look at. It is utterly unacceptable, the level of waste that is being dumped in and around Hathershaw. And I'm afraid that during the election process, we found that whilst this is one of the worst examples I have seen, it's not unique. And that is why one of the key revised priorities of the administration since I became the leader here is to recruit extra capacity into our street scene and enforcement teams so that we can get on top of these very basic neighbourhood service issues that we've got. And so the decision that will make that happen will be taken at Cabinet level. So I can assure you that as a result of conversations that I've had with plenty of other people that are experiencing the same issues as yourself, the issue of district cleanliness is very much being discussed within the leadership at Oldham Council and will continue to be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the reply. Now we've run out of time for any further questions, so we'll move on to ward or district matters. Okay.
I'm sorry. It isn't. I know you're only given a short amount of time, and this is why we're now, by September, into 2 years for seeking the truth. And I am doing exactly what the Reverend said at the beginning of the meeting, where we think of what we have to say. Why is it that when I asked help from our councillors, none of them came?
If I can just say, excuse me, if I could just interject, sir, that we have allocated time so that it's fair, so all questions from different parts of the borough can be asked. So we could have a chat regarding this later on.
Can I just give this statement to the newly elected councillors this May, the newly elected councillors, before the rot sets in,
I'd be grateful if you could take a seat, please, sir.
to tell you what exactly has gone on, because your role, according from number 10 Downing Street, which
Could I ask you to please take a seat, please, sir?
was, you're accountable to us. So can you please come out now with a statement and say...
Excuse me, sir. Could I ask you to please refrain and take a seat, please?
Newly elected councillors, can we have a meeting to try and resolve this? Can we have a meeting?
We can discuss this outside of the meeting, but I need to continue with the rest of the meeting, sir.
I need an answer now.
We are not able to provide you with an answer at this moment in time, sir.
And in the words of Councillor Hudson...
I'm sorry, sir, but if you continue to speak unauthorised, we will have to adjourn the meeting. I'm sorry. Please take a seat, otherwise we will have to adjourn the meeting. It's your choice.
Well, listen, I don't want you to adjourn the meeting.
So if that's the case, take a seat and let's have a discussion after the meeting.
Trust my councillor, Councillor Gloucester.
Sir, right, I'm adjourning this meeting until the gentleman takes a seat. Thank you very much. We'll reconvene later on. Thank you. Thank you very much. Apologies for the disruption. It's nothing like being thrown into the deep end. First meeting. Take a seat, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've asked the Mayor and if I can make a personal explanation before the council meeting restarts, because quite clearly these issues that have been occurring in council over the last 6 months seem to revolve around myself. However, that isn't actually the case. The case is that Mr. Brown had a complaint about Councillor Blythe, and subsequently Councillor Blythe left, so Mr. Brown therefore decided that he would pick on me. The reason why he decided the reason why he decided he'd pick on me is because myself, Councillor Steve Williams and an independent member sat on the standards board in relation to an allegation about Councillor Blythe that we found no further action to take forward with. At a previous meeting, Mr. Brown very heavily disrupted it, some of you may recollect, and whilst he was outside, unfortunately I had to go out for something for Derek because he was incapacitated at the time, and he said to me, "Why did you not declare an interest?" But the answer in relation to that question had already been given in council. So I told Mr. Brown, "You've had your answer in council, I'm not prepared to discuss it with you further." As a consequence of that, Mr. Kenyon, who was the other man, decided that he would make a complaint to me, about me, to the standards board in relation to my attitude. So he did, and the standards board heard that complaint, and no further action was taken. He then asked for a copy of my response in relation to that standards board, which, in fairness, I was more than happy to provide him with. Subsequently, he then complained about that response, but then went to the standards board again in relation to the complaint about my response. The standards board found that there was no complaint and the matter was concluded. Mr. Kenyon then asked for a copy of my response. However, bearing in mind that my previous response had elicited a complaint, I therefore took the option not to provide him with that complaint response in order that he couldn't complain about that again and waste more time. However, the situation is that we are now at a stage where Mr. Brown, Mr. Kenyon are attending meetings and, in fairness, are disrupting them. I find it quite offensive. I can deal with it. I've dealt with it all my life. So I have no problem with anybody calling me a liar or whatever else they want to do, because you know, it went with my job, and it's water off a duck's back. What I am embarrassed about is the amount of time that this issue is taking up for this council, and for that I do apologise to you, but unfortunately I'm absolutely of the view that I've done absolutely nothing wrong, and that I've no issue whatsoever with Mr. Kenyon or Mr. Brown, who in the whole of my time as a councillor I've only ever communicated 15 words to him, and I just feel that you need to know that. But what I'd also like to say is I think the time has now come when these people should be excluded unless they have something realistic that they need to bring to this council, and more certainly not about this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for clarification. So we'll continue where we left off.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, sorry, just 10 seconds if I could. The other little bit of that you might want to know is myself, the former leader and the former mayor all had an exciting 2-hour meeting after the last time we had this in the council chamber with Mr. Brown and his friend to see if we could get a way forward. and whatever, which Mr Entwistle had the joy of sitting in as well. So I wouldn't want anybody to know that we haven't done everything we needed, and there were a number of things done and agreed at that meeting which haven't been broken by myself, Councillor Stretton or Mr Entwistle, in terms of what was agreed to try and get to the bottom of it.
Excuse me, sir. Can you take a seat? We don't have time for this. Can you take a seat? Can you take a seat, please? Thank you. Right. Okay. We move on to ward and district questions matters. Questions have been raised for cabinet members from councillors on ward and district matters. Council agreed to consider the questions on a balanced basis. So the next question is for Councillor Malik as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have been approached by the residents of Neville Street and Prospect Road regarding the heavy articulated lorries using these narrow streets for deliveries to in and out of Armacell. There has been a lot of damages done to curbs, bollards and to cars. There was an agreed scheme to open up Mars Street at the top with its junction with Osborne Street and Waddington Street to enable the heavy lorries to drive through Quebec Street and onto Pedestal Road roundabout, so to prevent heavy vehicles using these narrow streets. Can the relevant cabinet member tell us when this scheme will be done? Thank you.
Can I call on Councillor Shah to respond, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Malik. The option to open up the top end of Mars Street to provide improved access to Armacell was considered by the Council a number of years ago, and a small indicative allocation at that time was set aside for a potential scheme. A detailed cost estimate of the proposed scheme was subsequently put together in 2013, but due to necessary identified utility works, diversions and significant costly improvements required to the actual entrance to Armacell itself, the potential scheme was not able to proceed further at that point. Since the scheme has been revisited, I can confirm that in the absence of any viable alternatives, it still represents the most appropriate traffic management solution to the problem. That said, there is currently no budget identified for the work in the current 3-year highway capital programme or any indication of contributions being considered by Armacell for off-highway works to their private access and circulatory arrangements.
Thank you for the reply. Can I ask Councillor Ali to ask the next question, please, as submitted?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Cheriton Hall Park is an exceptional park within the Cheriton North Ward, which is well visited by people from all parts of the borough. There is a proportion of the park that has been allocated to adults with learning difficulties, which is a huge asset to our communities, and I couldn't imagine a better use for it. However, besides it is a substantial area of hard standing, which seems to be for storage and for storage of machinery and vehicles from various parts of the borough. In my view, this is not a good use of space at such a prime location. I feel this space needs to be developed so that it directly benefits our residents and park users. I would like to ask the relevant cabinet member if they would consider reviewing medium to longer term options for this space and see how it could be better utilised for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. Councillor Shah to respond, please. Thank you.
Thanks. It is being used for storage by environmental services, but we are looking for alternative locations to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Next question is for Councillor Goodin, as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As you are aware, the land and buildings of the former South Cheriton School were taken out of ownership of Oldham Council by the Department for Education to allow the Collective Spirit Schools to open. Since the failure of Collective Spirit, ward councillors have insisted this land and buildings should be returned to Oldham Council. Can we be provided with any developments in this regard?
Can I Councillor Jakes to respond, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Goodwin, for your question. The Council has asked for the return of this site. The DfE has had to date not confirmed their position, but I've asked officers to contact them again in order to progress and clarify their position. Thank you.
Thank you for the reply. Can I ask Councillor Tariq O'Raymond to respond, please?
Sorry, Mayor. Do you want Councillor Murphy to ask the question?
No, this is the wrong script. Apologies, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Okay. Councillor Murphy, to ask the next question, please. Apologies for that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The former Crompton ambulance station has been targeted by vandalism and antisocial behaviour. Will the Cabinet member responsible provide reassurances to ward members and local residents that this issue is being taken seriously and that the Council will do everything in its power to resolve the matter and ensure these premises remain secure? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Could I ask Councillor Raymond to respond, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I thank Councillor Murphy for his question? The North West Ambulance Service sold the former Crampton ambulance station to a private owner over a year ago. The owner has not provided any indication to the Council about intentions for the future development of this site. Since then, the site has attracted intermittent antisocial behaviour and vandalism from local children. There was a spate of incidents in summer 2017 and it came back to police attention on the 7th of April and the 23rd of June this year, with reports from members of the public. The Council is working with the police to address this. As part of this, intelligence about individuals who are potentially responsible is being followed up so that appropriate action can be taken if this is substantiated. Key messages about antisocial behaviour and the impact on local community are to go out through local primary schools. Environmental enforcement have previously visited the site and placed a notice from Oldham Council on the building about keeping it tidy and secure. It has been revisited and found not to be fully secure. The owner has been issued with a fine and given to midday on the 11th of July to remedy this. A further visit is to take place, and if the building is not secure, the Council will undertake the necessary work and recharge costs to the owner. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for the reply. The next question is to Councillor McLaren as submitted.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The section of the Rochdale Canal that runs through Chadderton Central Ward and the adjoining wards is very poorly maintained. Ward councillors and local residents have been in contact with the Canal and River Trust with little success. One of our residents was in fact advised that the Canal and River Trust do have a litter boat, but it only operates in Manchester city centre, full stop. Could the relevant Cabinet member and appropriate officers work with the local elected members to engage with the Canal and River Trust in order to ensure that the canal is an amenity that residents can enjoy? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Could I ask Councillor Shaw to respond, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor McLaren. The Council already pays the Canals and River Trust a considerable sum to enable them to maintain the water body and towpaths. And officers will definitely engage with them to establish if they're able to undertake improvements to the landscaped areas immediately that surround the canals. And they'll also ascertain if the litter boat is able to operate within the canals in the Oldham area.
Thank you for the reply. Councillor Roberts, next question as submitted. Thank you very much.
Malvern Mews in Royton North is a new development which has not been completed to the standard to allow Oldham Council to adopt the street, which leaves residents with poor access and street scene. Could the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods update us on progress in putting in place policies to ensure that developers meet their obligations to finish environmental works to the required standard?
Thank you for the question. Again, it's Councillor Shaw to reply, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So standard policies and procedures are already in place in accordance with the sections 278 and 38 Highways Act 1980. We're currently considering a number of changes which will make these procedures more robust and will allow greater control over developers when considering new highways for adoption. Malvern Close, however, is an existing unadopted access road and has existed for so many years in its current condition. The developer is therefore not obligated to bring the highway up to adoptable standard, nor have we been approached by the developer to consider the unadopted section of Malvern Close for adoption. Okay.
Thank you for the reply. Next question to Councillor Akhtar as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A number of roads in Werneth Ward are in an awful state of disrepair, in particular Werneth Hall Road, Wellington Road, Napier Street East and West. Local residents have stated that the roads are worse than those in developing countries. Could the Cabinet Member please assure the residents of Werneth that these roads will be included in the resurfacing work programme? Thank you.
Again, it's Councillor Shaw, who's keeping you busy today.
Thank you. So for the current council year have already been approved and allocated against schemes based solely on detailed highways asset condition data, and they are being implemented across the borough. The ongoing condition of all the roads and other highway assets are continuously inspected, monitored and may become included on priority lists ready to form potential future programmes according to future available funding in future financial years. These roads that Councillor Actam mentions were all inspected in late June and early July according to the ongoing planned highways inspection process, and any matters that do require immediate attention that have been identified are likely to be carried out in late July and early August.
Thank you for the reply. Next question is for Councillor Heffernan, as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can we, on behalf of the residents, thank the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, the Oldham Mountain Rescue Team, one I missed was the Peak Park Rangers, the Army and all who helped to control the many more fires across Greater Manchester. We're obviously particularly referring to Saddleworth. However, we are aware of the excellent work done at Dovestones, into Tameside, and fires have also been fought on Crompton Moor, Denshaw and Winter Hill. Many of these fires appear to have been started deliberately. Earlier this year, the police took firm stance on apprehending and prosecuting perpetrators, including juveniles. We cannot understand how these people think. Security has been improved, including the appointment of marshals currently being funded by local councillors, the RSPB and United Utilities. The various services have gone beyond the call of duty and deserve our thanks. But can I ask the Cabinet Member to look at long-term funding to secure these marshal services? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I call on Councillor Jabbar to reply, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Heffernan, for your question. Of course, I agree to thank the marshals and, of course, the emergency services for the help they've given to fight the fire at the moors. In terms of the fundings for the marshal at Dovestone Reservoir should last for a period of 19 weeks, up to and including September the 9th, 2018. It's been funded by partners' contribution from Oldham Council, that's the Saddleworth District Executive, RSPB, United Utilities and Peak District National Park Authority. If favourable weather conditions continue for a prolonged period over the summer months, then further funding may be required from all partners. This will be subject to discussion and agreements. In the coming month, further discussion will be required to agree a solution to allow management of Dovestone site on an annual basis. Building on the working arrangement that are currently in place, partners will be asked to contribute and together with the Council provide sufficient resources to continue the work that has proven to be successful this year. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reply. Next question is for Councillor Adrian Alexander, as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The continuing saga of Saddleworth School, longer than the Forsyth saga. Could the Cabinet Member for Education update us on the progress being made in building a new secondary school for Saddleworth? When can Saddleworth's young people expect a school fit for the 21st century to be opened? Thank you.
I call on Councillor Jakes to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Alexander, for your question. The planning applications for the new Saddleworth School are currently being held up by discussions between the applicant and the Environment Agency on how best to ensure that flood risk is minimised by the development. The Council have been informed that the new flood risk information and modelling will be received from the applicant on the week beginning the 16th of July 2018. Should this information be acceptable to the Environment Agency, then after a further period of consultation, the applicants will be determined by the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you for the reply. Next question is from Councillor Dean, as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member responsible for highways inform me when the much-needed traffic scheme which has already been drawn up for Wellior Street, is implemented. Over a period of time, this long, straight, downhill road, there's over 200 properties, actually new properties have been built on Wellior Street, and it creates a danger, as well as access to parks and various other things from that street. And I was just hoping that this scheme could be completed at an early time to mitigate any danger to children and residents.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Sharp to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Dean. The introduction of traffic calming measures have been included in years 1 and 2 of the current Highway Capital Programme, and it's hoped that the measures will start in January 2019, well, between January 2019 and March 2019, once the detailed design, consultation exercise and statutory advertising has been completed.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Davies to ask the next question as submitted.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could the Cabinet member responsible for highways please let me know if Melbourne Drive and Turner Avenue in Failsworth West will be resurfaced? It is especially worn near the top of the road, near the Grassroots project of Melbourne Drive and Turner Avenue. And the drop pavements, will they also be made the same level as the road surface when it's redone? Because residents in wheelchairs and disabled scooters have a struggle at the moment getting down. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Councillor Shah again. Thank you.
So the works for both the roads are currently out to tender for the resurfacing, and they are programmed on site for September 2018, but that could actually change following the appointment of the contractor and completion of the current tender process. But they're due to take place within the current council year of the year 18 and 19 works programme.
Thank you for the reply. Next question is from Councillor Curley as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We're all aware of the ongoing situation with the horrendous fires on Saddleworth Moor, and this has been a fear of the community for some time. The situation at Dovestone Reservoir has been a constant source of worry and frustration, with access problems for residents and the potential for further fires and environmental damage a constant danger. Dovestone is frequently referred to by OMBC as the centrepiece of the tourist attractions for the borough. Through the provision of the Dovestone Marshals, we've seen that Marshals can alleviate much of this problem, but the funding for this, as we know, is only temporary. So will the Cabinet member responsible provide guaranteed future funding for the Marshals and other measures as they're identified, as well as seeking funding from other stakeholders, United Utilities, Peak Park Authority and Purico, so we can help safeguard homes, farms and the local environment? After all, this area is of huge significance to the whole borough and Greater Manchester, and it's only right that the Council will lead on financing these measures. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I call on Councillor Jabbar to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Curley, for your question. I think I've covered the answer that you're looking for earlier on, just to say that you know, the funding is in place until 9th of September this year, and if we do need to provide further funding, we will look at it. I can give you that commitment, and I do agree this is a fantastic location for the whole of the borough, and we'll do everything we can to protect it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, sir, for the quick reply. Councillor Bashworth has submitted question, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've been experiencing what seems to be a population boom of rats in the Shore Road End Park area. We have had them before, and myself and my ward colleagues have paid for treatment there, but we don't seem to be able to get on top of it. And I know they are spreading out, as we do well know in our back garden recently. So I wonder if the Cabinet member could reassure us that some extra baiting and whatever we need to control this situation can be done. It's a very popular part of young people. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Could I ask from Councillor Shah to reply? But if I can just reassure you, Councillor Bashworth, that it's not just Rotten Park, but Worneth and Alexandra Park, we've had numerous issues of vermin there as well. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, and I appreciate your concerns, and I can confirm that officers are going to take extra action in the park in response to the sightings. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is as submitted by Councillor Briggs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Highways Department has stated that the Ash Bridge over the River Medlock in Daisy-Nook is almost 50 years old and is a risk to health and safety of users. The bridge has been closed since January 2018 and the panel net cannot be replaced due to the excessive cost. The bridge had barriers in place, but these are frequently damaged and removed by parties unknown. How are the Council going to balance closing a public rights of way and keeping residents safe? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I call again Councillor Sharp to respond, please. Thank you.
Tenders are currently being sought to demolish and remove the existing Ash Bridge to ensure the public safety is maintained. The bridge is closed currently under a temporary closure order of the particular public right-of-way, and this will remain the situation as additional relevant funding is sought to contribute to a potential replacement structure.
Thank you for the reply. Next question is by Councillor Tour, as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, fly tipping is a cause of a major concern. With people dumping their rubbish irresponsibility, despite numerous efforts by the Council, the situation is not getting any better. Certain parts of Medlock Vale Ward, which includes Barsley, Heathershaw and Coppice, have become an eyesore. Can the Cabinet member outline what extra measures are proposed to tackle this important issue? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, it's your turn again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tor, for your question. So, we're acutely aware of the concerns being expressed relating to fly tipping incidents in some neighbourhoods and across Oldham, and officers have been asked to look at the options available to provide extra resources, and we're just waiting for the cost to consider. Yep.
Thank you. Next question is from Councillor Harkness, as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The footbridge between the Woolpack Field and the garden centre in Dobcross has been closed for quite some time, but residents would very much like it to be reopened. I am aware that it is a responsibility of Newbank Garden Centre. The garden centre bought the land from the council in 2001 at an auction sale. My understanding is that when it was closed, because the bridge decking is in a poor condition and has flood damage, so the garden centre closed the path which is on their land. I know that the path is not actually a definitive right of way, however there has been a path at this location for over 20 years. I understand that there can be objections to the closure under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, I think it's section 53, and would appreciate the Cabinet members' assistance in ensuring this or other means are used to help get this footpath back in use. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Sharp, would you like to reply, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkness, for your question. The existing path is currently the subject of an ongoing definitive map modification order and is currently being considered by the Public Rights of Way team to allow the route to be added to the definitive Rights of Way map that can be viewed on the Council's website. The process involves the collation of user evidence forms and the collection of historical evidence before a report can be submitted to TRO, the Traffic Regulation Order Panel, which meets quarterly. The decision of the TRO panel determines whether the application is accepted or rejected to modify the route to a definitive right-of-way with recognised status. A key element in the current process that has increased timescales somewhat is the circumstances of the unsafe bridge issue. The structure is located on the Newbank Garden Centre site and is privately owned and not a council asset. So the current responsibility of the repair or reconstruction actually rests with a private landowner.
Thank you for the reply. We have a couple of minutes, so we've got allocated 3 more questions from the Labour Group. Are there any questions from the Labour Group? If not, I'll pass the next question on to Councillor Gloucester for the question that's submitted, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Currently, around Sean Crompton, there's a growing proliferation of land and buildings of the commercial variety that have fallen out of use and are standing derelict. I've no doubt that most of these buildings have been purchased by land bankers, purchased in the hope that the value of the land and buildings will increase. Unfortunately, these buildings are a target for damage, break-ins and antisocial behaviour. They're a blight on the lives of their neighbours. Examples of the sites are the Old Bull's Head pub at the top of Buckstones Road, Grange Bar, Eli Butterworth's electrical shop on High Street in Shaw, the Old General Post Office and Legends pub on Rochdale Road, the King's Arms at Crompton Way roundabout, and those are the ones that I can just name off the top of my head. Could the Cabinet member tell me if there is any plan in general to make these property owners take responsibility for the buildings and bring them back to use? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I call on Councillor Fielding to reply. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Gloucester, for your question. I'd say that you're probably not alone in this room in having buildings like this in your ward, which would prefer to be brought back into use. I guess the technical answer to that is that if they're in private ownership, the council doesn't have a legal interest in them, and it's only if they fall into such a state of disrepair that they become a health and safety concern that planning and building control would get involved. And I have some in my own ward that are in that situation too, and it's incredibly frustrating because they are an eyesore and a drag on local areas that we would like to look much better. But I guess the point of this question that I can respond to best is that it's about making Oldham a more attractive place to do business, where people want to reopen pubs, open shops, bring them back into use, and so that kind of happens naturally because the nature of the market is such that it supports that, and that we don't have to intervene, and that we don't have these kinds of problems. And that's the kind of place that I want to make Oldham as a borough be.
Thank you very much for the reply, and that concludes those questions. Now we move on to formal council. Apologies. We've received the following apologies from absence: Councillor Brooke, Chatterton, Harris, Hewitt, Hudson, Aftab, Hussain, Moores. Councillor Hudson. Oh, okay. Sorry, sir. Okay, apologies. Councillor Turner and Williams as printed. So, going on to the minutes. Is Council agreed that the minutes from the meeting held on 23rd of May 2018 are agreed and as correct record of the meeting, subject to an amendment on item 7 of the minutes, insert after second paragraph, Councillor Sykes and Councillor Alexander paid tribute to the work of Councillors Klonsky during the time served on the Council? Agreed? Okay. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members in respect of matters to be determined by the Council at this meeting? Can members declare any matters to this meeting? Councillors Gloucester and Gary have a pecuniary interest in item 14A, Police and Crime Panel minutes. Councillors Bashworth, Chouhan, Hussain and Turner have personal interest in item 14B by virtue of their council appointment to Mayo Care Board. Please can they raise their hands to declare those interests? Thank you very much. Those are noted. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, can I just make a point of order, please?
Go ahead.
All it is that I must surely, and Hazel must surely have a conflict of interest in relation to administration motion 1 as well, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So if you could declare a pecuniary interest with those matters, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I've also got an interest in 14B as a member of First Choice Homes Board.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, those have been noted. There will be a form circulated in the chamber. If you could make the appropriate correspondence on there, please. Thank you. Urgent business. There is no urgent business that's been brought to my attention at the moment. Communications. Council will be aware that the firefighters and the army have been working, and the mountain rescue team have been working in extreme difficult conditions and challenging circumstances in the Saddleworth and more fires. I'm sure the Council will join me in recording the thanks to all those involved, and they've done an excellent job. Thank you. Petitions. There are no petitions to note outlined in the report outstanding. Outstanding business from previous minutes. Okay, so up there. Councillor Hewitt is unable to attend this evening's meeting, therefore notice has been given to the Chief Executive that Councillor McLaren will second the motion in Councillor Hewitt's absence. Do we all agree on this? Thank you. So could I ask for Councillor Fielding to move? We're on agenda item 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So, I rise to move the motion, but firstly, I can advise that I accept the amendment submitted by the opposition. To explain why I thought it important to bring a motion here to Council to celebrate trade unionism and the TUC's 150th anniversary, I'll refer back to the speech that I made at Annual Council and the experiences that brought me here to this role. Last month, I stood up and spoke about family, my upbringing and my journey so far. I talked about how my parents provided a comfortable home environment because they had good jobs with decent pay, regular hours and good terms and conditions. And I've spoken since that meeting in various forums about how, even though I didn't find work in the field I trained in, I still managed to get on for the time being with a job in retail, which again was safe, secure and reasonably paid. Safety at work, security of employment and reasonable pay don't just happen by accident. Whilst there are some examples throughout history of a small number of employers who voluntarily improve the pay, terms and conditions of their workforce, for every one of those, there are many more who required encouragement to do so. And this encouragement, more often than not, has taken the form of trade union campaigning. I'll just give some examples. Looking back as far as 1889, the London dock workers staged a 5-week strike on the issue of fair pay, job security and regular hours. 1889, and it sounds familiar and relevant today. And they were among the first to give a voice to unskilled, casual, poorly paid workers, and the strike marked a milestone in the rise of trade unionism, recruiting tens of thousands of workers to the Dockers Union by the strike's end. Another example is a strike by women at Ford's Dagenham plant in 1968. The strike in protest at unequal levels of pay between men and women who both held skilled jobs led eventually to the Equal Pay Act of 1970. And trade union campaigning on health and safety regulations has also improved protections for workers on health and safety in the workplace, resulting in the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. These are just a few examples which show the positive influence of trade unionism on the lives of working people, though sadly it's not all good news. From a peak of more than 13 million in 1979, membership has declined to just 6 million today. And I don't believe that it's any coincidence that the rise in insecure work, zero-hours contracts and poverty pay has coincided with a decline in trade union membership. Recognising the value that unions have added and continue to add to society, we must promote and raise awareness of the success that has been achieved by trade union campaigns, and we must encourage many more working people to become members. And this motion is part of that. As I alluded to earlier, I owe my own standard of living to the trade union and labour movement, and that is true for the many tens of thousands of people throughout our borough. It's therefore only right that we celebrate trade unionism in the year of the TUC's 150th anniversary, and I urge all members to support this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, sir. I call on Councillor Sykes to move and Councillor... Sorry? Oh, apologies, yeah. Yeah, could I count on Councillor McLaren to second that, please?
Formally second the motion, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Sykes to move and Councillor Gloucester to second the amendment? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be very brief. Formally second the, and I'm pleased the leader's accepting it, second the amendment we tabled, and just make the point, support the motion as printed, and we just think our amendment adds to it, because I think it is right that we recognise that Oldham Trades Union Council was in fact created 12 months before the TUC, and one of our most favourite suffragettes, Annie Kenny, was one of its first members. I think with that reflected in the motion, I think it makes it better and stronger. I look forward to celebrating the 150 event, and I'd add my comments to the leader's comments that the reduction in trade union membership is directly proportional to the increase in, shall we say, employment practices that are best kept are imported from the third world. And I just think sometimes we all need to just reflect, like the Minister said at the start, when people want something lastminute.com, or they want it really cheap, you need to look where it's been made, who's it been made by, what wages were they paid, what health and safety, if any, were they even made by adults rather than children. And perhaps if we all did that, some of those practices would be eliminated very quickly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gloucester.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think I actually rise to second the amendment, but I'll be really brief. Basically, I've never ever been a union member in all my life, but for 30 odd years I was a member of the Police Federation, and that's just as good as a union. So I hold a great value in unions in respect of workers' rights, and the thing that I like about the TUC particularly is they're not politically affiliated, but they can point us in direction of policies that would be positive for workers' rights, social cohesion and community welfare, which is something that we as a council are really concerned and involved with. They've been going, as we said, for 150 years, and the priorities this year are just as good in that they want an economy that works for working people, great jobs for everyone, and a thriving movement that delivers particularly for younger workers. So most certainly they reflect with our policies, and on that basis I'm happy to second. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment? Councillor Fielding, do you want to reply to this? Or can we just go to the vote?
I don't think I need to. We all seem to be getting on.
Excellent. So can we go to the vote then? Okay, everybody. Okay. So does Council agree the amendment? Okay, thank you. So everybody hands up who's does the council agree the motion is amended? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Item 9, Youth Council. There are no Youth Council business for today. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 10, Leader and Cabinet questions, 30 minutes. The next section is Leaders' Cabinet questions time. The Leader in Main Opposition will ask questions to Councillor Sykes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question tonight, it's in two parts really, and I'm pleased to ask it to the new leader because he's talked about plans to revise the master plan for Oldham Town Centre, and I'm sure everyone in this chamber, myself included, look forward to seeing these revised proposals. But let me first raise tonight with the leader the issue of the outstanding developments on two of the town centre sites, that's mainly Princes Gate and so-called Hotel Future. The council's website still proclaims Princes Gate one of the most ambitious redevelopments for our town centre since the 1980s, and former leader Jim McMahon, now MP, called it a game changer for the new Oldham. Version 1 of this royally named scheme was due to open in 2017, but it collapsed when flagship retailer Marks & Spencer pulled out, despite the £9 million plus sweetener to fit out a new store and the promise of a rent-free occupancy period for at least 6 months. Then we moved on to version 2, minus a Marks & Spencer's, or maybe with just a Marks & Spencer's food hall, and another council leader, Councillor Jean Stretton, who was then supposed to announce a new development partner for this site in the summer of 2017. It's now 12 months on, and not a shout nor a sign, so perhaps we're now on to version 3. Now we have yet another new leader of the council, if you stick with the theme. So, Mr Mayor, Princes Gate was supposed to deliver 700 jobs, 21 million a year to the local economy. Instead, it has so far cost council taxpayers of Oldham many millions in undisclosed abortive costs spent on marketing, planning, regeneration professionals, as well as the costs of site assembly and clearance. And what do we have to show for it? A very, very, very costly car park. Truly a gateway fit more for a pauper than a prince. So let us turn then to the other side, the will it, won't it go ahead hotel and conference centre on our doorstep, the development adjoining the Queen Elizabeth Hall, formerly known as Hotel Future. Poor Hotel Future, it's become more like an unwanted old mongrel, and when once it was classed as a Crufts pedigree. It was to be first a bespoke hotel training establishment offering courses in the hospitality industry. Then it became a standard hotel from a standard chain, and then the plan was abandoned when the site, including the QE Hall, was scheduled for demolition. And now the new leader is holding the promise of perhaps refurbishing the QE Hall, which I'd welcome, and putting perhaps the hotel back on the site. In any case, the joke has clearly again been at the expense of Oldham Council taxpayers. It was revealed in a recent Freedom of Information request that just over £400,000 have been spent on this project between 2011 and its abandonment in 2017. So here eventually is my question. Will the leader please end the misery and tell us what development will be done, when it will be done, and with whom? And will it be done at Princes Gate and on the Hotel Futures side? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Call on Councillor Fielding to reply. Thank you.
Thank you to the Leader of the Opposition for breaking me in nice and easily. Thanks, Howard. Okay, so clearly regeneration of the town centre and the various sites that we have throughout the town centre was a key focus of my pitch when I became the new Leader of the Council. And the two sites that Councillor Sykes is referring to and the difficulties that have been experienced over the years in bringing those to development illustrate why it is imperative that we get something absolutely right and get something that we can be confident will be delivered, not just in terms of happening, but will deliver the outcomes that we want for the people of Oldham. Princes Gate is a key gateway into the town centre from some of the most affluent parts of the borough, and I will not accept anything less than the very best for that site. And so, among schemes that have been worked up that we can build on and enhance to ensure that we do get a gateway down there, and the officers are working. I'm working with officers about what mine and what the new administration's ambitions are for that site to ensure that we get the kind of gateway that we know Oldham deserves. Interestingly, on Hotel Future, the information that I've been given about the nature of the market for hotels in Oldham is that there is a demand. There is a demand for hotel provision, particularly in Oldham Town Centre, because can we name one? Can we name one that currently exists in the town centre? No. But we now, with the Metrolink, with our proximity to Saddleworth, which is a popular tourist destination, and even the Etihad Stadium, there is a key demand to bring people into Oldham that want to stay overnight, and it is important that we provide for that demand. Now, will that take the form of Hotel Future as it was first envisioned? I think we know that the answer to that is that it's highly unlikely. But there will be hotel provision in Oldham as part of our redevelopment plans because of that demand. But key to all of this is that our regeneration schemes so far, including the Old Town Hall, have had to be council-led. We have used our funding to make these things happen because we know that if we leave it simply up to the market, then things don't happen. You know, if we'd have left it to the market, we would still have a derelict listed building in our town centre. We would still have no cinema provision. We would still have nowhere to go out and have a decent meal of an evening in Oldham Town Centre. And things have changed as a result of the interventions that we've made as a council, the leadership we've shown, and the money that we've put in. And that same approach is what is going to ensure that we meet that demand for hotel provision and that we secure a key gateway deliverable scheme at Princes Gate. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is the Leader of the Minority Opposition to ask a question. Apologies, I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Mr. Mayor, have I done something to upset
No,
you?
no, I'm just jumping ahead of myself.
All right, good. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Leader for his answer to his question, and as always, will be helpful and constructive in terms of delivering quality developments that bring real benefits and change the lives of the people in this borough. My second question tonight is about school places, or rather the lack of them. And I return to an issue I raised with your predecessor. And when I look back at my notes, it's near enough a year ago today, namely the lack of available places for children of our borough in the schools of their choice. And I'm sorry to tell you, Mr Mayor and colleagues, that 1 year on, the situation is now worse, not better. This year in Oldham, just short of 400 children, 387 to be exact, missed out on a place. And I thought, first of all, it was their first choice. No, they missed out on a choice of any of their preferred secondary schools. So that's yes, that's not their first choice, not their second choice, not their third choice. The no choice, nearly 400 kids of any of their preferred schools. That's 1 in 9 of our Year 6 pupils, or around 11% to be exact, of those who got their preferred secondary schools. Only 73% got their first preference. Compares badly with the national picture, which is 82%, so we're nearly 10% off the pace nationally who got their first preference in a secondary school. And overall, we're bottom of the class. We're the worst performing. And I take no pleasure saying this, but somebody somewhere has to, because we need to get a grip with it. We're the worst performing local authority in Greater Manchester when it comes to offering school places. And I'm amazed at that, because I can remember being stood in this chamber many moons ago when Manchester was bottom of that league, and now it's us. So that's almost 400 children and their parents failed by our system, and not getting the first choice in secondary school, and not getting their second or third either. And I regret, like I say, it's worse. When I said last year, in 2017, it was 8.9% of pupils. So that's 2% worse than it was 12 months ago. So, Mr. No apology for saying it again. I do think it's scandalous. Education is the bedrock from which children go on to succeed and do whatever they try to do with their lives and their educational future. It's also the gateway to not being enshrined or enslaved by poverty in terms of all those other things that you can do. But not offering them a choice at secondary school, so they're in schools they don't want to be and the parents don't want to be, it will make it so much more difficult to inspire them to strive to do their best in their final years of schooling. I really do look forward to a council meeting when I can ask the leader a positive question about education in our borough. I'm desperate to do it. I keep looking, but I can't find them. And I'm sorry to say the current level of performance, I can't see this being any point soon. And I'll take no pleasure in saying I predict now I'll be able to ask a very similar question to this in 12 months' time. But I hope I'm wrong and I can get up and say the situation has improved. I am pleased that a replacement Royton and Crompton school is now being built in my part of the world. And we've got sensible councillors in Shaw, Crompton and Royton who have supported that development, as we have got some sensible councillors in Saddleworth as well, I might add. Some. And we haven't had any of the shenanigans people have had elsewhere, and construction is now well underway. I was concerned to hear, though, that it won't actually be open for September and might actually be a month late, and I do hope we can do something about that, because that would be a real shame to not start the new term on time and in the new building. And I'm pleased, and I know some of my colleagues it causes problems, but the expansion at Crompton House, a well-performing school, will provide some other excellent educational opportunities, and my colleagues are anxious that those go to local pupils in Shaw and Crompton. However, and it's been mentioned earlier tonight, what about colleagues in Saddleworth and their families? The replacement school at Diggle still appears far off and uncertain and years behind schedule. So I'd like to ask the leader, what are we going to do to make more secondary school places available from this September, and what's being done to get Saddleworth School back on track, and what can be done to ensure that Crompton House expansion meets, first and foremost, more places for local children? Thank you.
Okay, thanks once again to the Leader of the Opposition for his questions. He is correct. I agree with him absolutely that education is the gateway out of poverty, and that is why it is one of the key priorities for the Labour administration. We've pledged to improve school readiness amongst our young people. We've pledged to provide the additional places that we need, and we've pledged to increase the proportion of our young people in Oldham that attend good or outstanding schools. And Councillor Sykes said that he hoped to bring something more positive to a meeting in future. You've not done it tonight, but I will do it for you, because in terms of school readiness, we are the most improved authority in Greater Manchester in making sure that our children, when they start at infant school, are ready to learn. In terms of investment, sorry, I won't do that one, I'll do that one last because that's the biggest part. In terms of the proportion of children that are attending good or outstanding schools, it is improving, and we are confident at the next round of inspections, when Ofsted come knocking, it will improve further. In terms of providing the school places that we need, we are hampered by the utterly perverse rules that the government requires us to follow. As a council, we're not allowed to just build a school. We either have to find a partner to deliver a free school or get an academy chain to open here. Now, the good news on that is that a free school bidding round is open, and we are already in discussions about how we can create the additional places that we need here in Oldham, particularly where the pressure is in the town centre and going out towards Chadderton. The point about Saddleworth School, I believe, has been answered earlier on, but currently the applicant is in discussions with the Environment Agency about how they can overcome the reasons that that was objected to in the first place, and I'm confident that we will get it absolutely right when that comes back for planning. And finally, on Crompton House, you know, that is an excellent school. It is a known quantity in the area, and I want to see that it is Oldham children that benefit from the additional capacity that is being created there, and I will do whatever is within my power to see that it is children from the Borough of Oldham who do attend.
Thank you, sir, for the reply. I call on the Leader of the Minority Opposition to ask a question. Councillor Hudson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, because my friend and colleague, Mrs Pam Byrne, is ill at the moment and can't attend, I've decided to use my time to ask her question, because she's very keen on the environment and she would like the leader to answer this. She seems to think that the use of plastic cups in all our meeting rooms is really against the policy of the council. So she's asking, when will it be discontinued? Simple one, that for you.
Good. Thank you to Councillor Hudson for his question. I can confirm that it is September 2018 when the use of plastic cups will be discontinued within the council, though I can see that there are a number of members sat around the chamber that have already got on board, myself included. This is refillable, and there's plenty of people drinking tea and coffee from cups that can be refilled. But the date when you will no longer be able to obtain one in this building is September 2018.
Thank you very much. May I remind members that full council agreed that the following the leaders' allocated questions will be taken in order which reflects the political balance of the council, and I have advanced a notice of questions. So therefore, I call on Councillor Shuttleworth to ask the following question, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Despite a critical report from the National Audit Office and a legal defeat for the government over the treatment of people with disabilities, Pension Secretary Esther McVeigh has hailed universal credit as a great British innovation. The universal credit is based on leading-edge technology and agile working practices, and the UK is leading the world in developing this kind of person-centred system. As Oldham was a pilot area for the introduction of universal credit, does Councillor Jabbar agree with these comments from the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions insofar as residents in our borough are concerned? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you for the question. I call on Councillor Jabbar to respond, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Shuttleworth for the question on this very important subject. Look, you know, Britain is a a great nation, we're a proud nation. And if the Secretary of State says universal credit is a great invention, national invention, that is a sad moment for us. It isn't. We all know that. Why is it not? Well, because to get the initial payment of universal credit, there is a massive delay. And that delay put claimants in debt. It means people have to go to food bank to feed themselves and their family. It means that people's children are going without food. And actually, Mr. Mayor, some people have committed suicide because they can't cope with the pressure of not having an income coming into their household and not being able to meet the demand of the household's outgoing. So therefore, how is it that this universal credit can be a great British invention? Obviously, it's not, because it is simply putting many thousands of people's lives at risk. I'll tell you what is a British great invention. That's the National Health Service, which has actually helped to save millions of people's lives. So, of course it's not. And the Secretary of State actually apologized for her comments after making those very ill-informed comments. But, Mr. Mayor, that's the sort of political bit, if you like, and my personal view about this. But we've got to deal with the people who are impacted by universal credit. And there are thousands of people in Oldham currently who are in receipt of universal credit and are actually experiencing lots of hardship. So to them and to your residents, please, you need to make sure that you tell them or make them aware of the services that we have at Oldham Council, just to help them to make sure that they are claiming the right benefit, including free school meals, including going to our welfare benefit team to make sure that we do a quick check to see that they are getting all the entitlements that they are entitled to. So you need to please make sure that if anybody comes to you who are in receipt of universal credit, then you refer them to Access Oldham or to our welfare right team. But in terms of the question, Councillor Shuttleworth, I don't agree with her comment, and certainly this hasn't been a great invention, because what it has done, it has brought a hardship and misery to literally hundreds of thousands of people. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the reply. I call on Councillor Hack to ask the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, as we celebrate the 70th anniversary of the NHS, created by Labour and opposed at every vote by the Tories in 1948, could the Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care comment on the implication for Oldham of the recent unfunded NHS budget increase announced by the Prime Minister, and our plans for transforming services through health devolution in Greater Manchester? Thank you.
Could I call on Councillor Chon to reply, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Huck, for asking the question. May I take this opportunity to congratulate everyone on 70th anniversary of NHS. There are loads of people in this chamber, Councillor Dean, Councillor Ahmed, Councillor Roberts, and many others who contributed significantly to NHS. And also special congratulations to our hard-working staff. I'm sure you would not disagree with me. It was one of the greatest inventions of this world, which was a mother of many inventions, starting from a test tube baby to many other things, great things happen. And it was only a few miles down the road, that time known as Park Hospital, known as Trafford General Hospital, where Nai Bevan announced NHS. And this leaflet was distributed a few days before to all the household. And if you may allow, Mr. Mayor, I would like to read it. It says, National Health Service. Your new National Health Service begins on 5th July. What it is and how do you get it? It will provide you with all the medical, dental, and nursing care. Everyone, rich or poor, man, woman, or child, can use it or any part of it. There are no charges except for few financial items. There are no insurance qualification, but it is also not a charity. You are all paying for it, mainly as taxpayers and it will relieve your money worries in time of illness. And that leaflet itself tells you actually what people were going through at that time when NHS was formed. And we all benefited from NHS, and we do it on a daily basis. Can I also use this opportunity to thank my colleague, Councillor Roberts, and residents of Oldham East and Saddleworth for this lovely card for Oldham Council, and accepted it on behalf of the Council. So thank you very much. Now to your formal question. The real bit. So recent announcement by Prime Minister was of a 3.4% increase per year for the next 5 years. I would like to say I welcome that, but I would still say it's not good enough. Firstly, there are a few things to consider. Firstly, it was to the subject that NHS meeting a number of tests. So tests in NHS means efficiencies, savings, plans, and all those things will have impact on patient care, directly or indirectly. Secondly, this was a national announcement, so we still don't know details. Thirdly, it was NHS mandate, so money was given to NHS. So all the other things like public health, like training, is actually not benefiting from that financial deal. Just to give you comparison, 3.4% increase. In 2001 to 2004-05 Parliament, we had 8.4% increase in NHS. And now is in 2014-15, we had 0.8% in that Parliament session, 0.8% increase, which was the lowest since 1951-55. So I'm not surprised why my colleagues nurses have to go to food bank to meet their basic nutritional needs. Finally, also it should be noted that no additional funding for adult social care, which has significant impact on effectiveness of services, are delivered, are being offered. So in terms of locally, our plans for transformation services through health devolution in Greater Manchester, each locality is developing their own plans as directed and supported by GM Health and Social Care Partnership. Integrated care approach in Oldham, bringing together a range of stakeholders, commissioner and provider known as Oldham Cares, and a whole system redesign is underway with the purpose of integrating health and social care. In addition, and in order to ensure we take a joined-up approach to commissioning services, a new integrated single commissioning function has been progress, ensuring we can align both adult and social care clinical commissioning group funds around the Section 25 legal agreement. I will not bore you with the rest of the answer, but I would like to say that Oldham has significant, very own challenges in health and social care, but we also have actually great opportunity to do things and hold ourselves accountable and be part of that system. So after discussion with Chief Executive, as accountable officer and a leader, we proposing that to set up an advisory cross-party health and social care group to actually look at all the issues and advise us how to move forward. And I'm also pleased to announce on 70th anniversary of NHS, we are one of the first council where clinical commissioning group agreed to have elected members on the clusters, which we feel is a great achievement towards the democratic accountability. Thank you.
Thank you for the reply. Can I ask for Councillor Akhtar to ask his question, please?
Just bear with me. Thank you, Kath. Parents from Worneth Ward, in particular from the Coppice neighbourhood, are at a disadvantage in gaining admission at a good secondary school due to admission policy changes to some schools and due to distance in other cases. There is speculation that a new secondary school will be developed in Oldham. Could the Cabinet Member for Education and Culture reassure the residents of Coppice that they will not be at a disadvantage, again due to distance and the quality of education provided by the chosen sponsor?
Could I ask Councillor Jacks to respond, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Akhtar, for your valuable question. The LA has a policy of only supporting applications for new schools from good or outstanding providers, and this is reflected in our free schools policy. Any new provision will be expected to offer a fair and transparent admission policy which caters for local needs, such as your ward. The LA will satisfy itself that any new free schools offers an admissions policy which does not disadvantage local residents in the school's catchment area. Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Gloucester to ask the question as printed?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In recent months, it has been debated in this council people trafficking and modern slavery. Yet in May of this year, the media reported that Oldham has the highest number of incidents of young people in our care going missing of any council in the UK. According to media reports, our looked after children, where the council acts as the responsible corporate parent, went missing on average of 13 times in a year. Now, in any family situation, it's not uncommon for children to be unaccounted for a few hours. But fortunately, in almost every instance, the missing loved one reappears none the worse for their absence. But this is surely, on the face of it, a frightening statistic. In these instances, there is the need for greater concern and greater vigilance, as children's charities say. Youngsters in care are extremely vulnerable because they are more at risk of being exploited by criminal gangs and adults who groom children. Can I ask the Cabinet Member to comment on these recent statistics from the Office of National Statistics, more specifically, whether at this moment in time we can, as a council, account for all of the children who have gone missing? And can the Cabinet Member also please outline what this council is doing to keep our looked after children safe? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Can I ask Councillor Jakes to reply, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gloucester, for your question. On behalf of Councillor Chatterton, I would like to respond. I share your concern about looked after children who go missing and the additional risks they face. As corporate parents, the Council needs to ensure it is doing everything it can to understand why our young people go missing and to prevent it happening. To clarify the quoted figures, the 13 times relates to the average per looked after child who went missing and only relates to 12% of Oldham's looked after children, i.e. 88% of looked after children don't go missing in this period. This is no cause for complacency, and since the time period covered in the published figures of 2016 to 2017, we have put in additional measures to address the issue and prove our response. Most recently, we have designated a single point of responsibility, the team manager of the Phoenix team, for coordinating initial responses and ensuring cases are escalated where necessary. This approach also ensures a better joined-up thinking with our response to children missing in education and other safeguarding concerns. Whenever a young person goes missing, we work closely with the police colleagues to establish likely whereabouts and, when known, and ensure their safe return. Every child is offered an independent return interview to establish the reason why they went missing and work with the young person to prevent a reoccurrence. The safety and well-being of our looked after children is a prime priority for me in my Cabinet role and as Chair of the Corporate Parenting Panel. I will hold Council officers and those in partner agencies to account on any ongoing basis to ensure the whole system works to keep our children safe whenever they are placed. This would include close monitoring of the number of young people who go missing and the frequency. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you for the reply. I call on Councillor Ball to ask the next question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Would the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods join me in congratulating everyone who helped Oldham Council achieve the Bronze Award from the Sustainable Food Cities Network and highlight the achievement which this recognises?
Thank you. Could I call on Councillor Shaw to reply, please?
Yeah, of course, Mr Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Ball. It would take me great pleasure in congratulating not just our staff here, but our partners and especially local residents, which made this, achievable. Oldham's been awarded the Sustainable Food Cities Bronze Award, and it's the second borough in Greater Manchester and one of a handful of places nationally. The awarding panel said Oldham's work has shown what can be achieved when creative and committed people work together to make healthy and sustainable food a defining characteristic of where they live. The award recognises our co-op approach from grassroots to boardroom to promote healthy, sustainable and local food at all levels. This includes a wide range of food activity linking health, education, enterprise and growing. Initiatives championed by the award include Oldham Food Network, Get Oldham Growing and the Green Dividend Fund. We're going to continue to work together to grow a vibrant local food economy, increase fair access to food for residents, improve education and create healthy communities. So a big, huge, massive well done by this administration to all the local residents and our partners that made it possible.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Leach to ask the next question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Could the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods, Councillor Shah, please provide an update on progress being made on Lees Park Eco Centre and the plans for its use?
Councillor Shah, thank you.
So the Eco Centre was finished for the open day on the 24th of March 2018. As part of Oldham Council's Get Oldham Growing programme, we've transformed the redundant unused bowling green and cabin at Lees Park into the Eco Centre. The centre will be used for growing organic fruit and vegetables and will facilitate a range of courses on topics such as healthy eating. The centre will also educate residents on all aspects of sustainable living, the environment, wildlife, energy efficiency, renewable energy and water management. We want residents and community groups to make use of the facilities on offer, which will include vegetable plots, a classroom, polytunnels, wildlife pond and composting area. It's a social enterprise scheme managed by Alan Price and not us as a council. So for further information, if you could contact Alan, and his email is alan.price@live.co.uk.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Councillor Gary to ask the next question, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks to new building developments in Failsworth West, the ward will now benefit from a considerable amount of Section 106 monies. Is it feasible that councillors may have more say on where and what it is spent on? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Can I ask for Councillor Roberts to reply, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank Councillor Gary for her question. As many members will be aware, planning obligations under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act are a mechanism which makes development proposals acceptable in planning terms that would otherwise not be acceptable. The common uses of Section 106 are to secure affordable housing and specify the type and timing of this housing, and to secure financial contributions to provide infrastructure such as roads or play areas. It's also possible to use Section 106 to say what can or can't be developed on a specific piece of land or how it can be used. The legal tests for when you can use a Section 106 agreement are set out in the Community Infrastructure Levy regulations. And these tests are that it's necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, that it's directly related to the development, and it's fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. Providing a councillor's request meets these tests, then it's reasonable that a councillor can influence where and what a Section 106 contribution is spent on in consultation with the council's planning officers and the developer in question. There is potential to pick up this idea in the neighbourhood review that the new administration has ordered in order to empower ward members in more areas, a review which is being overseen by my colleague, Councillor Shah.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time, so we'll go to item 11, questions and observations on Cabinet minutes. We'll just wait for Councillor Fielding to come back. Or should we pass on to Councillor Shah? Could Councillor Shah move and Councillor Jabbar second? He's back. Okay. We're on item 11. Okay, so could I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Shah to second the Council notes minutes, Cabinet minutes circulated?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do any members of the Council who are not Cabinet members have any questions on the minutes? Okay. Can I ask the relevant... sorry, okay. Do any members of the Council who are not Cabinet members have any observations on the minutes? Okay, Councillor Harkness.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's on page 15. It's Cabinet of the 26th of February. It's item 7. It's relating to special educational needs. And obviously we're all very disappointed with the inspection report, and it's clear that we need some transformation. But my concern is that it's still a big issue. And in the local newspaper on the 6th of July, it said that staff are on their knees trying to transform the service, and it said that a number of significant issues remain a challenge to raising the standards of the service. The quality of education, health and care plans, the special needs assessments carried out by the council to establish what support a child requires are not great. It goes on to say that the SEND department are drowning under their caseload and numbers of new applications, and that the budget is significantly overspent, and that we haven't got any early help and support systems within the schools. This sounds like it's a long way off having the infrastructure and the procedures in place to address the issues outlined in the Damning Ofsted report in time for its review in November. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Can I ask the relevant Cabinet Member to respond to the observations submitted?
Thank you, Councillor Hartness, for your observation. The nature of SEND is that, as a council, it is something that we must get absolutely right. You know, it's an incredibly important issue because of the children that are involved, and because our staff feel so passionately about it. Sometimes the language that they use is very emotive because they care so much. And that is reassuring to me that they care so much to get so frustrated and use that kind of emotive language. But I can assure you that the administration takes our obligations on SEND very seriously, and we have invested the resources in it that are necessary to turn it around. And I'm confident that we will see, and we already are seeing, improvement in the service. And hopefully that will be reflected in a future inspection that will come to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to... item 12, Notice of Administration Business. Motion 1. Yeah, we're just waiting for councillors who have pecuniary interests to leave. So, motion 1. I call on Councillor Bashworth to move and Councillor Steve Bashworth to move and Marie Bashworth to second the motion.
Let's keep it in the family. Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is a serious issue, this, and I rise to move the motion as printed, but I just want to put a bit of context onto this of why we thought I brought this here tonight. I mean, a bit like deja vu, we've discussed this sort of thing time and time again in this council for various reasons. But if you, any one of us, if you look at your casework, you'll see that a lot of it's taken up by complaints about antisocial behaviour, petty crimes which are not petty to the people involved. If your car window gets put through, that isn't petty. If somebody breaks in your house, that isn't petty. If somebody throws a brick through your front window, that isn't petty either. But these are crimes that are not being given priority by the police. The police will openly admit that to you, that these crimes are not being given priority. So, what can we do about it? You've only to look on any of the social media sites that proliferate these days to see that there are groups that are set up specifically to talk about these issues in the site. Some of them have quite aggressive names and there's a lot of aggressive language used in it. But people have got a point. It doesn't matter what you might hear or read from people about crime statistics. Down on the street, down in your wards, down in our ward, in the ward that I am, even on my street, crime is up, and it's up significantly. And unfortunately for us, it's the type of crime that the police are not taking seriously. Now, let me just say that I am not attacking the police here. I have no reason to attack the police. I will not attack the police. And I've got nothing but praise to the officers that I have dealt with on a personal basis. It's the only way we're going to solve the problems we have is more police. And that means more money. We're not going to replace 2,000 officers overnight. I'm not daft enough to think that's what we're going to do. So what can we do about it? I think if you look in the... there's 2 points in the motion that I'm asking Council to support. And if you just look at the second one, it's the second one on there. It's about the 101 service. Now, we know that it cannot cope. If anybody's tried to use it, you'll be sat there on the phone for 30 minutes, an hour sometimes. You'll get frustrated and put the phone down. When you do get through, you have your details taken, a conveyor belt type way, and nothing will happen. So if you're lucky, you'll get a call from the resolution team maybe the next day or the day after. They'll take the details on the phone. That's it, the case is closed. If you are lucky, an officer might come and visit you, and they'll probably explain that, well, we'll come and take some details, but there's nothing we can do about it. It's just not acceptable in a civilised society like ours. We just cannot keep putting up with this. Now, I know the Mayor, Andy Burnham, spoke publicly many times about his concerns about the 101 service. It needs to be resolved. Now, we are not going to resolve that tonight in the Oldham Council, and I'm not naive enough to think that we can do that. But we've got to keep the pressure on, and this is one way that we can do that for our residents. We can keep the pressure on by doing something like this. So one of the calls in here is to ask, again, to keep pushing, and ask the Mayor to try and do something about the way that 101 calls are taken and the way they're responded to. The most important thing on this motion, for me anyway, is it's a matter of communication. When residents can't get through to the police on 101, who do they ring next? And it isn't Ghostbusters, it's us. They ring us. And they ring us because we're always there. We're always on the end of the phone. We've got emails 24 hours. Well, not all 24 hours. I know Jean does it 24 hours. Oh, sorry. A lot of us respond very quickly. But there's also a high expectation among residents that we have got a special route into the police, and we haven't. And I think we need to have that by one means or another. And that's what I'm meaning by the negotiated memorandum of understanding. There was a time when Councillor Gloucester was our Royton police inspector, and he gave us his phone number, and we could ring him up and we could deal with things, and it was fantastic. And by the way, Councillor Gloucester is an extremely honourable man, and I would stand up for him at any time of the day. And he was great when he was an inspector. We also at that time had the numbers of the PCSOs. We had their phone numbers, and they let us ring it. We were very responsible at how we did it, but we had a route to people who could come back to us and say, yes, we'll go and investigate that. It may be tomorrow, it might be next week, in Chris's case, and then generally it would in the hour if you were on duty. But we haven't got that anymore. Even the way the police have their shift patterns arranged at the moment. They're either all in or they're all off. And you wait for an email and you could wait days and days for it. We need to...
Thank you. Thank you. Is it Marie now? Could I ask for Councillor Marie to continue? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to second this motion. All public service roles are challenging, but policing has to be one of the most difficult. This government has recklessly cut police funding, resulting in reduced numbers of police officers and resources, leaving the police force struggling to deal with rising crime. As ward councillors, we are well placed to understand the issues affecting residents, and there has been an increase in contact from worried residents who have been victims of crime, such as antisocial behaviour, theft from homes and cars, and vandalism. For residents who are victims of this type of crime, it is intimidating, and they do feel under threat in their own homes. Of course, police officers want to attend every report of a crime, but priority has to be given to incidents where there has been a threat to life or public safety, or where vulnerable members of our members of public need urgent help. So officers are being pushed into making choices they would prefer not to make. Working this way has become necessary due to the cuts of funding, but we need to get back to a strong level of community policing. And it's important that we work together. Police officers are looking for support of local people, parents, schools and local businesses. And as councillors, we can add our support through working with residents' associations, Home Watch and other community groups. So combine these issues with the problems victims of crime experience when they call 101, and it's perfectly understandable that these residents are feeling frustration and annoyance. These issues are nationwide, but we need to represent the people of Oldham. And so we urge this government to be aware of how the cuts to funding and police force are affecting our residents. I second the request to continue to press the Mayor for Greater Manchester regarding the problems around the 101 service. This service does need to be better manned and it does need to be more effectively managed. I also call on our Cabinet Member to negotiate a common line of action between this Council and the police force. There needs to be reassurance that the challenges to community policing are being addressed and that the concerns of our residents are being listened to. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on this? Okay, thank you. Councillor Teague.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I thank both Steve and Marie Bashford for their resolution, and can I also thank in the way they've contributed. They've actually made my life a lot easier in terms of explaining some of the difficulties and pressure faced by the police force. And I think this pressure is recognised across the board. And if you even look at the minutes of the meetings held in this chamber, when the government at the time was proposing police cuts to an unprecedented scale, there was a number of us who were standing up here and arguing that that will only lead to one conclusion, and that will be a rise in crime, a rise in antisocial behaviour, and the increasing inability of the police force to deal with that, because that's the only natural consequence of any public service when they are facing cuts to that level. And can I also say that obviously this administration clearly takes this as its priority, and Sean, when got elected as the leader of this council, one of his main priorities was to have a standalone cabinet position for policing and community safety, because obviously that was one of the concerns that the residents, when we speak to them on the door, conveyed to us, and in response to that, there is obviously a special cabinet position to deal with these matters. Can I also say, Mr Mayor, that the Mayor of Greater Manchester recently launched a plan for safer and stronger communities in Greater Manchester. In this, he recognised the pressure on police service and makes a commitment to continue to lobby the government to address the inadequacy of funding of services in Greater Manchester. The strategy also recognises the need to improve channels of communication, in particular to address response times on the 101 services for reporting non-emergency calls. It is a priority within the Greater Manchester strategy to improve this, as well as to more generally improve communication between neighbourhood policing terms and communities. We will continue to lobby for this through our role on the Greater Manchester Police and Crime Steering Group. A local memorandum of understanding between the Council and Oldham Division of Greater Manchester would also contribute to improved communication about policing issues. Chief Superintendent Neil Evans, the Police Territorial Commander for Oldham, Rochdale and Tameside, that gives you some kind of an indication how far their services are stretched, has agreed to work with the Council in developing this. This could include, for example, ensuring that councillors have contact details for key officers in neighbourhood policing team, and agreements on the timeliness of responses and how the police and councillors can work together to address local concerns about crime and antisocial behaviour. And the work has already started on that, and very soon we will have that bottom down, and this will be shared with all councillors. So the least we can expect is to have a contact number for local councillors as local leaders. If they need to get in touch with the police, that they should have that open channel of communication. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sykes? No, I've got another letter here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support the motion. I particularly just want to focus on the 101 number. I agree the police have had cuts, reduction in numbers, and therefore can do less than they could do. But then so have a lot of other public services. And I actually think they've done a better job of managing it than maybe they have. What I think you've actually got, if we're being honest with the police force, is partly in denial, but also partly not being honest with the politicians it's accountable to, and not being honest with the public it serves in terms of what it does and doesn't do, or rather what it will and won't do. And I think the great danger for me, and I spoke to the divisional commander about this, is I think we're quite near a substantial amount of the public losing confidence in our police force. And I can remember what that used to be like 20, 30 years ago, and I've no wish to go back to it now. And I think the 101 number typifies it. The number of times that has been raised in this chamber, the number of promises we have had, MERS, no MERS, police committee, of people who were going to resource it, fix it, just bear with us, it'll be all right in 6 months. And it's still as CRAP as it was when it was first brought in. And if you're interested in doing intelligence-based policing, the one thing you need is intelligence. And you want members of the public to ring in, not only about the low-level ASB, that's really important to them, but you need them to ring in about the drug dealers and whose car it is and whose reg it is. And then they can go and feel the collar of some very serious criminals. And what's happening time and time again, and Steve's right, you're left literally hanging on the telephone, and people just get cheesed off with it after half an hour or whatever. Then sometimes when you get through, you're not always encouraged to make it an official report. You're sometimes encouraged, do you really want to do this? And I've had that from a number of constituents. So regardless of the number of officers we've got and how we've done the policing, I think what's really important in terms of the 101 number is we resource it properly so people can ring that number, and within a reasonable period of time, 5 minutes or more, less, somebody answers it and takes the details down. Then people cleverer than me, whether they use algorithms or whatever, can put all that in the gloppity machine and work out where the bad people are and go and feel the collars. And that would make me feel a lot more safer, and it would certainly make a lot of the older people I represent feel safer. So I'm happy to support this motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have a number of speakers. So next is Councillor Sheldon. We've got Councillor Hudson, Ali, Councillor Murphy. So everybody will get time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add to Councillor Steve Bashforth's statement earlier on, that people do get fed up waiting on the 101, and they come to us as councillors. And it was only the other week, at the height of the fires on the moors, that a chappie from Oldham had been up to Duffstones to have a walk round and noticed these 2 cars unloading barbecues. Now, barbecues are not allowed around the reservoir, but they're obviously going to, in these tinder dry conditions, have a barbecue and watch the fires on the top. So I did actually ring 101. It was quite frustrating, as you say, it was 20 minutes or so, but I did get through, and the police were called out and they attended to it, and hopefully they stopped another fire in the trees near Duffstone. So the system does want speeding up, I would say. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would urge, I think anybody in their right mind will support Mr. and Mrs. Bashforth's proposal. I'm being very tactful here. The 2 Bashforths are a fighting force on their own. They don't need any help. But I would say the support is there. But do remember one thing. This council has partnerships. The Deputy Mayor happens to be our chairman, and they have excellent communications with our local police. So perhaps if the partnerships got involved, and shortened up their service, it would help the members of the public. And I have no sympathy for people that say they come on to councillors. Of course they do. That's why we're here. And we've got to listen to them. But it's not, you can throw any amount of money at it, but if you don't get people with the right attitude answering the phone, it's the same problem we have at Oldham Metropolitan Borough Council. If you get a good person on the end of the phone, it's resolved in a few minutes. If you get a bad one, and I don't want to give names to the Chief Executive, but I might do later, you're there for weeks and weeks. So I would say get your partnership chairman to forge links with the police, because it works wonders, and it's working very well in Saddleworth and Lees. And I say thank you to the Deputy Mayor for that.
Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm rising to support this motion, Mr. Mayor. I feel as elected representatives, if we are to give the best representation to the people of Oldham, there needs to be a stronger partnership between the police and the council. A clear, well-documented memorandum of understanding outlining expectations of both parties, I think, will strengthen that partnership working. Elected representatives can feel confident that inquiries on behalf of residents are responded to and done in a timely manner. The 101 service, I think it's a bit of a shamble, to be honest, and for myself, it's difficult to comprehend why this essential service is so poor. Over the years, as other councillors have stated, there has been many representation about this service, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better. We have seen a sharp rise in antisocial behaviour, and leading from it some very serious incidents in Oldham. As this motion points out, antisocial behaviour blights communities for areas affected. People feel trapped in their own homes, creating more and more pressure on families and our elderly residents. Just on Friday, Chariton North councillors, we received a letter through our constitutional services from one of our residents highlighting serious antisocial behaviour by youths in Fitton Park, Burnley Lane, which is a predominantly residential area, and this antisocial behaviour is actually taking place on a routine basis. Youths are mixing vodka with high energy drinks, smashing bottles and causing a havoc for residents. When residents approach them, they become extremely aggressive. Residents feel helpless and try contacting the police 101 number. And this is the words of one of our residents, the letter that came in. When we try to contact GMP, it is impossible to do using the 101 number, which appears never to be answered. The other day, I was on it for 1 hour and 7 minutes and finally gave up without it being answered. Okay, so that's from one of our residents, and I've got the letter over here. In response to the complaint, clearly we will be taking a number of actions, and one of the things we immediately did was to have this information communicated to approximately 500 of our residents through the Friday prayers at the mosque, so that residents can be more attentive to what their young family members are doing in the evening. I believe we can possibly where we can possibly make a difference is by forging stronger partnerships between police, council leaders, community leaders and our resident groups. I am supporting this motion as a memorandum of understanding will strengthen the partnership working between the police and the council. It is also right that we press the Mayor of Greater Manchester to review the 101 service, as it's not acceptable to our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. To save time, could we just bring new points to this particular item? So, Councillor Murphy next. Thank you very much.
I think what's been said.
Sir. So the next one is Councillor Mushtaq.
Yeah, I'll be quick, and I think it is a new point. I'm always contacted by residents in regards to, and sometimes I feel like a copper myself, and I get screenshots of the 101 and they've been on it for 30 odd minutes. But I do have the number of the PCSOs in my ward, and they are excellent, Bex and Sharon. And the other thing, because we talk about finances and the impact of cuts, but there's a false economy in this as well. There's the confidence building amongst the public. But actually, the number of times that I've phoned the PCSOs and asked them to go and visit someone because something's happened in the morning, they've gone on, had a word with both parties, and it just nips it in the bud straight away. And you know that if they didn't do that, that's going to escalate and end up in maybe half a dozen police visits and a load of antisocial behaviour on the street. So I think that community element of it is twofold. So I think I just want to make that point. It's a really important thing.
Thank you very much, Kaiser Raymond.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be very quick. It is a new point. I concur with everything that's already been said, and we've had some fantastic speeches, and it's been good to listen to what Councillor Ali has been doing in his ward. The visibility with PSCSOs at the moment, and particularly in my ward, has reduced over 7 years, and I don't know whether that's to do with the cuts. But I want to raise the issue again, and you're probably, Mr. Mayor, you're probably bored of hearing it, but fly tipping is a crime. And a lady did stop me the other day and said, maybe it does have something to do with less neighbourhood policing, and visibly I'm seeing less and less PCSOs year on year. So yeah, I support the motion, and I totally support a memorandum of understanding between the council and the police.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to add that you know, we need to encourage residents to report these crimes, 101 or an email or whatever, so the police can build up a data record, and then they can, you know, go and approach it. Once they've built up this profile of this area as being targeted by antisocial behaviour, whatever, then they can, you know, reply to that. So we need to encourage the communities to use the 101, or if not, I'm sure there'll be an email number, an email address somewhere that we can email registrations or areas, and then police can act upon that. So without further ado, Councillor Bashfield, would you like to reply? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just a couple of points. Councillor Hudson, I have absolutely no problem and encourage people to contact me. You're quite right, it is my job, and we will not shy away from it. The frustration is not being able to help at that point, because we're in exactly the same position as the residents are. We can't get anywhere. And as for creating bonds with the local police, we do exactly that in Royton. We have regular meetings with the police when they're on shift, because when they're not, that's it, finished, nothing. We've had several meetings with locals where the police have attended if they can, but the frustration is if the police are not on duty, that's it, finished, nothing. And that's where the frustrations lie there. Howard, you're absolutely right about intelligence. How can they do things without the intelligence? We need community policing to do that. But a frustration as well is, and it is a criticism of the police, when you give them what appears to be cast iron evidence of a crime. We had an incident where some people were pinching flagstones outside a shop. Got CCTV very clear of the people, the registration numbers, we knew who it was, where they were, give it to the police, absolutely nothing. And I suppose everybody can do anecdotes. I'm not saying that that information was utterly bona fide, but you know, people do give us stuff like that all the time, and it just doesn't seem to happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What we do need is all about communications. In these days of Facebook, residents expect answers pretty quick. And if we can't get them reasonably quick, then we will come in for criticism as much as the police. And I think one thing that happens, which I don't like, I don't mind people coming to me about anything. What I don't like is getting blamed for something that I've no control over. And I think the government are quite crafty here, because they've taken all these numbers away and we end up carrying the can as usual. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. So does Council agree to this motion? Okay. Unanimous? Yes. Thank you very much. No abstentions? Okay, thank you. So that's carried. We'll move on to motion 2. We've only got literally 4.5 minutes. So I call on Councillor Leach to move and Councillor Taylor to second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few stories to tell about the impact of the chaotic state of rail services on residents of Oldham. They tell of the plight of passengers who travel from Greenfield to work in Salford. My colleague will address issues related to services around Chadderton. One morning recently, the 6:28 train and the 6:44 were both cancelled. The next train, the 7:31, entailed a change at Staley Bridge for Victoria. There was a train to Swinton, people got on it, and then they were told to get off because there was no crew. A train that went to Salford Crescent came. It was going through Swinton. The guard phoned to see if they would give him a stop order, but they couldn't because the train was delayed already. 5 colleagues got off the train at Salford Crescent and clubbed together to take a taxi. They arrived at work after 9:30. 3 hours, 3 trains, and a taxi to commute 20 miles. Before the timetable changes, there had been a through train. One evening, there were slight delays on all services, so the train from Swinton was running late, but there was a possibility of catching a delayed train from Salford Crescent to Piccadilly, and also the delayed Piccadilly train to Greenfield. This journey took more than 2 hours in time, and of course a toll in anxiety and confusion. These are the everyday struggles our constituents have to cope with in order to make it to work and back home. How can they be expected to manage their family, childcare and work commitments under these circumstances? This temporary emergency timetable was to be enforced for only a couple of months. Now we hear that it might well be continued for a while, and the best we may expect is that the revised May timetable, which led to this chaos, will be in operation until the end of the year. The new May timetable was intended to streamline intercity services, which have been given greater priority over improvements to local services. Underinvestment in local rail service is the underlying problem. It results in lack of rolling stock, too few trains at peak times, and the unreliability of the service. We note the government's failure to deliver electrification in the north has exacerbated these problems across the north of England. The contractor for the work at Bolton, by the way, was Carillion. The fragmentation of rail services and the operation of the franchise system has meant that there is no single body prepared to take overall control of the situation and has allowed all rail organisations to blame someone else for the ongoing problems and for no one to take responsibility. Mr. Mayor, this motion commits the Council to work closely with the Mayor and Transport for Greater Manchester. Through the Council's representation on Transport for Greater Manchester Committee, we will urge that Transport for the North be given the necessary policy and financial powers so that it can have full oversight of all local, suburban and regional services in the North. It is clear that our rail services cannot be properly cared for from London. Mr. Mayor, I move the motion.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Taylor to second?
Mr. Mayor, I am seconding this motion because I often have to rely on local train services to get to meetings for work, and I can assure you that it isn't just the weather that has been getting me hot under the collar. Being stranded at a station in soaring temperatures with no idea when or if trains will run, however, has. And when trains do turn up, we are being packed in like sardines, and in my own personal experience, onto trains without any air conditioning because of the age of some of the fleet. Northern Rail's revised timetable has been nothing short of shambolic, with lengthy delays and last-minute cancellations, and some trains skipping stations to make up time and to avoid further overcrowding, which has just added to the misery caused by this disruption. Only recently, my friend's teenage daughter left her home in Oldham, only to find herself stranded at Burnley Manchester Road Station en route to Preston on a Sunday evening. As she had very little money on her, she made the choice to share a taxi with a group of male strangers in order to get back to her university halls of residence. This demonstrates that these failings are more than just frustrating or an inconvenience. They are potentially putting people at risk, and the removal of conductors will likely exacerbate this situation. And this isn't a one-off. Passengers are facing these conditions day after day, and it is seriously affecting their quality of life. My nearest train station, Mills Hill, is very popular with many Oldham residents. It is used by 330,000 customers on a yearly basis. And while I welcome the planned platform access improvements, I'm sure that greater accessibility will encourage more people to use the station, leading to an increased flow of traffic. It is therefore vitally important that passengers with disabilities or passengers travelling with prams and small children and the elderly are not disadvantaged because of the inadequacies of the service. Northern Rail's own statistics for our regional area shows that from the end of May to the end of June in 2017, 2% of trains were cancelled as compared to 8.5% in the corresponding month for 2018. Also, services subject to cancellation or arriving 30 minutes late or more rose from 2.1% to 9.2%, which I'm sure you will agree makes pretty dismal reading. But also, to add insult to injury, the number of short-form trains, i.e. trains with fewer carriages than promised, has almost trebled in that same period. This is more than just a botched introduction of a new timetable, because the revised timetable was never just about rescheduling timings. It was designed to deliver more services between major cities. But even without the introduction of these additional services, there was already a shortage of trains and train drivers. Northern Rail's lack of rolling stock is a major concern because it covers the whole franchise, which creates a service that is simply not reliable. It appears to many users, following the continuing timetabling failures, that Northern Rail is completely unaccountable, and therefore I welcome the Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, along with our local MP's efforts to challenge the government in calling for a more sustainable management of rail franchises. If we are to deliver a service that is fit for the 21st century, we need greater investment, a review of the franchise system, and a revised timetable that provides stability and reliability. I invite all members to support this motion, as it is crucial for Oldham's residents who rely on their local rail service that we support initiatives aimed at meeting local needs. I second.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're out of time to ask any questions, so can we move straight to the vote? Does everybody accept the motion? Is that unanimous? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Motion number 3. We've run out of time, so can I ask Councillor Stratton and Councillor Hacks, do you want to roll it over, or should we take...
Can we roll them over, please, Mr Mayor?
Okay, is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Item agenda number, item 13.
Too bad we couldn't talk about it.
Members, please be aware that due to typographical errors, the summons should read Councillor Harkness to move. I call on Councillor Harkness to move and Councillors Gloucester to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to support this motion to look at addressing how we support young people in schools with mental health difficulties. Now, mental health is supposed to be made a priority by our Prime Minister, but I've seen no evidence of that. For far too long, it has been seen as differently to other conditions. Access to mental health services for adults is challenging, but it's even worse for children in terms of getting that support. You may recall I seconded a motion in December 2016 around campaign for equality in mental health. I've worked raising mental health awareness and support in Saddleworth, and amongst other things, been pushing for a training academy to support job seekers with mental health conditions. I'm pleased that the Health and Wellbeing Board and Greater Manchester have been making progress around mental health support. The Cabinet members already mentioned, obviously, that we've got budget issues regarding the NHS as well. But the strategy highlights that mental health is everyone's business, enabling local areas to make decisions for systems-wide outcomes supported by shared information and early intervention, which is essential. Now, my rationale for this motion basically stems from my day job. For those of you who don't know, I run a resource provision for students with a diagnosis of autism, where Manchester Council allocates students so that they can access a mainstream school with support. And now every day I work with students who are suffering from mental health conditions. I work closely with a variety of outside agencies who all do a fantastic job. The big issue is there's not enough of them in Manchester. In Manchester, for example, to access CAMS, the Adolescent Mental Health Services, currently a waiting time of 14 weeks. There's an organisation called 42nd Street in Manchester who support emotional well-being and mental health among young children, young people, and there's a 1-year wait there. Mind, excellent charity, who I've worked with in times, they're not taking any referrals at the moment in Manchester, central Manchester, because of the number of cases they've got on their load. It's not quite as catastrophic in Oldham, but it's still a major issue. The other main issue is that not enough is being done to support young people at an early age. In an average classroom, 3 children will be suffering from a diagnosable mental health issue, which can affect quality of life, learning and relationships. Mental health, like physical health, is a fluctuating variable which can deteriorate as well as strengthen. These issues often are unaddressed until they're way down the line, and then it becomes a bigger job, and I've already said the resources are already sparse. I wanted to address this issue head-on at my school, and I had a meeting with our head. We formed a mental health working group. We've been working on a specific mental health policy, promoting, which is around the principles of promoting positive mental health in all students, increasing staff awareness of strategies which promote mental health, increase staff awareness of common mental health issues, alert staff to early warning signs of risk factors and mental health, and offer guidance and support and looking around those early health. So I've arranged some members of my team, along with the pastoral and safeguarding team at my school, to be trained as mental health first aiders. We have a mental health lead in my school now, who is also a qualified counsellor, who offers a counselling service. We have been we need to have well-being and mindfulness embedded in our curriculums and ensure that we run workshops or teach mental health and emotional well-being issues in a safe and sensitive manner, along with signposting of self-help tools. We also need a targeted approach for some students who have
we all agree to move the extension?
In the skills or need some extra support. As I say, I welcome the work being done by the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Council of Employment of a mental health schools advisor, but I know waiting times for adults with mental health difficulties are bad enough, but they're horrendous for children. Schools need to be clear on where to signpost children to help and explore school counsellors and in-house help. Please support the motion.
Thank you. Can I Councillor Gloucester to move? Second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak to second the motion proposed by Councillor Harkness to address mental ill health in schools. As a chair of governance at Oldham Primary School and as a national leader of governance, I encounter the issues schools face in relation to this matter on a very regular basis. Schools are now dealing with children in reception classes that are identified as struggling with a serious depression and other mental health problems. And this has recently been highlighted in a report on Oldham. In fact, health chiefs estimate that 3,800 of our children have a mental health disorder. The waiting time in Oldham should hopefully now decrease from 20 weeks to 6 weeks. However, this is slightly hopeful. 12 additional staff have been appointed at CAMS, but even if that decrease does take place, 6 weeks of waiting can cause irreparable damage to learning for these children and is still far too long. I know that many schools are using the pastoral mentors to counsel identified children, but finances are inadequate and training for teachers is seriously lacking. As such, the identification of these issues can actually be delayed until the coping strategies of the individual are exhausted, which causes extreme and challenging behaviour, which is on many occasions the first sign that is noticed as an issue. This not only affects the individuals themselves, their learning, but also their peers. Local anecdotal evidence suggests that there has been a rapid increase in the number of reported self-harm or suicide incidents, together with increased hospital attendances and admissions for young people. It is widely acknowledged that the failure to support our young people at the earliest opportunity costs lives and money. Therefore, the earliest intervention is needed to stop them falling into crisis, which will impact the rest of their school and adult life, together with that of their peers, parents, carers, teaching and support staff. As Councillor Harkness has stated, schools need to be very clear on how to identify these children, where to signpost them to, together with the access and ability to provide school counsellors and in-house support as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I call on Councillor Steve Bashworth and Councillor Roberts to add to the amendments?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just rising to propose some amendments. This is a very laudable and excellent motion. But the thing is, Mr Mayor, I believe that we already do this, and that's why I propose the amendments to the motion. It does actually ask that we ask the council resolves ask the lead cabinet member to work with the health and wellbeing, determine how we do it. Well, I think that's done mainly through CAMS, and some of the bullet points in the original motion are actually covered if you read through the CAMS in various sections. Some of the points that Hazel raised there are quite interesting and very, very important as well about children. There are a number of schools that actually that do the things that you're asking for. I work in a school where these type of things are addressed very seriously. There's regular training for all staff, support and teaching staff, to deal with, as part of the safeguarding, to deal with mental issues and vulnerable children. And you know, how the mental health can be dealt with by peer pressure, things like that. It is all being dealt with in the schools. I do appreciate not every school will be able to do this, because of what you quite rightly said, the pressures on the budget. And it may well be that one school decides, rather than spending some money on a council, they might need a new maths teacher. That's the way of the world at the moment. But yes, this is an excellent motion, but I do believe the council actually do this, so I think it's a good way of highlighting that, and again raising the profile of this. Really, I mean, they call it the hidden illness, don't they? And it's a great way of doing it, but I think we shouldn't hide our light under a bushel, because we are already doing it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bashwood. Councillor Roberts, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In seconding this amendment, I would like to acknowledge the importance of good mental health for our children and young people. And I agree that the need for early intervention is paramount. So I just want to focus briefly, you'll be glad to hear, on on the work that the Council has already done in terms of supporting children's good mental health in schools. This is a whole school and college approach. It looks at what kind of support systems need to be in place in schools to help children who are just beginning to show mental health distress, how children and young people with more complex mental health needs can be helped, and how schools can work to make sure and commission the right kind of services. As has already been said, this is a very serious issue to be addressed. Suicide, and I think this is quite shocking, suicide is the most common cause of death for boys aged 5 to 19 and the second most common cause for girls of the same age. 3 out of 4 children with a diagnosable mental health condition do not get access to the support that they need. And the Council has worked on this toolkit and this guidance to help to make sure that the situation improves. Supporting Young Minds is intended to support schools and colleges to make a positive impact on children and young people's emotional health and well-being, and this does include supporting the staff as well. Supporting Young Minds is a holistic approach covering the issues raised in the opposition motion, and the amendment reflects this. The framework has been supported by an extensive training programme which I attended in my role as a governor of Blackshaw Lane School, and if the training is offered again, I would urge anyone who's either works in or is a governor of a school in Oldham to attend, because it was very insightful and helpful. And finally, I would like to acknowledge that a framework like this and the resources being invested are not enough. It's one thing, as Councillor Harkness said, for the government to produce advice. It also needs to provide the resources to support teachers and pupils in tackling this serious and important issue. But having said that, I would like us to acknowledge the hard work that has already been done and that what we've tried to put in place to support our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Okay, Dr. Chua.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no doubt that we all support motion in spirit. There's no question that mental health is very important, not only for children, but also for adults, and having the right system and right pathways are also important to make sure that speedy access to the mental health is available when we are in crisis. And I always say that, and I will say that again, that we live in a strange world where if you have a chest pain, you get a response with a blue light in 8 minutes. But if you're suicidal, you spend 4 days to locate a bed countrywide, because we have only 0.2 beds per 1,000 in UK, which is much, much lower compared to across the Europe, and not even comparing across the Atlantic. I'm quite happy to share, I do have a list of all the services offered currently in school. I do believe that most of the stuff which we are asking is actually being provided jointly between council, penine care and clinical commissioning groups. So I'm quite happy to circulate all those information. In spirit of that, I would suggest that we move to vote on amendment. Thank you.
Seconded. Thank you, Councillor Chuan. Does Councillor Harkness wish to reply back? Councillor Heffernan.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept the amendment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quite brief, I promise you.
Councillor Heffernan, just 1 second, please. Okay, I've been advised that because Councillor Harkness has accepted the right to reply, we will go straight to the vote. So you'll be given an opportunity later on another subject. Okay, so we'll go to the vote. Yeah. Amendment, yeah. All those in favour of the amendment? Okay. Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. So now for the substantive motion. Everybody agreed to that? Right, so apologies. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I speak to the motion as amended, and as I said, I'll be fairly brief. One of the problems has been referred to both in the main motion and the amendment, which has now been accepted. Year 2000, when they were setting up what are now the NHS trusts, and in this borough it was the Oldham NHS Trust, I was at a meeting with the then Director of Public Health in Oldham, and they were talking about the budget. I was with the Director of Social Services, as he was then, and the Director of Public Health said when the money was sorted for the new trusts, the acute section will get the vast majority. Now that's understandable. The reason I'm on this thing at the moment is I've got a new hip, which is quite expensive, and there's other things. But the money that was left for mental health was minimal. And that was the Director of Public Health. I was there. This has been the attitude of governments in the last 18 years. Mental health is always the Cinderella service. And it shows no more than where the Cinderella service is treating our young people. I trust everybody is going to vote for the motion as amended. I would like pressure put on the government for better funding for the mental health. They are trying a little bit, but Pennine Care has had regular cuts in services because of funding. We can't go on doing this, and we can't leave our young people at risk by not having people there to support them. I'm delighted, Councillor Bashforth, Councillor Roberts, the work that's been done in Oldham. I'm absolutely thrilled at that. It shows that somebody cares, and that is this council as part of that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harkness, do you want to, you're right to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agree with what Derek said there. Councillor Roberts made some excellent points there about early interventions and some points about the suicide among boys, and that people just don't get that access to help. But the key thing is we need more resources, which is the key thing which we put on. So I think we need to be shouting that message out to the government, because it is the Cinderella service. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we move to the vote as amended. Everybody in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. No abstentions. Thank you very much. That's carried. We move to motion 2. I call on Councillor Sykes to move and Councillor Gloucester to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief because the motion is long, and I do apologise for that, colleagues, but I must have had my sugary drink or something when I was writing that, or whatever it was. I think the first thing I'd like to say, and I think we've done very well if we get to 10 to 9, you know, this isn't a nanny state party pooper, you know. People having a flutter is an important social thing for some people. It's a bit of a laugh, be it, you know, on the thing at the Grand National or whatever it is, or maybe even betting on a World Cup football match or not. And in its place, like most things, it's fine and appropriate. However, with many things, and this is one, and it's a bit of a Cinderella one in my experience, particularly with young people, is that gambling not only destroys individuals but actually destroys their families, as does any addiction for anybody around them, and there's actually less help for people who are addicted to gambling than there is if people are addicted to alcohol or other drugs. I was surprised when I researched this that it doesn't fall within our public health function, believe it or not. Nearly everything else does, but this doesn't, because we're not an attributable body or whatever it is. So I think that's something we should do something about. So, I said I'd be brief, Mr. Mayor. This is about how you deal with an addiction if established in the young, and it is very easy because it's out of sight. So in other words, it's not regulated, it's not like in a pub, it's not like in a betting office, and we're vastly approaching where more gambling is done online than anywhere else. It's done in the privacy of people's own homes, on handheld devices, and it's hidden, but it can be addictive. And we need steps in place to make sure young people don't get addictive and then they don't get caught in that vicious circle. So without that, and without any further ado, Mr. Mayor, the rest of the details, facts and figures coming out your ears are in the motion, and I'd ask Council to support it.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Gloucester to second, please?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I rise to second this motion. I'll just build on what Howard said, and I'm looking at the clock and I will be brief. I'm just going to simply reflect on my own observations. Firstly, in Shore Town Centre, where I live personally. Now, although I'll argue all day that Shore Town Centre has a diverse range of shops that are all full, it's noticeable that there's as many betting shops in Shore Town Centre as there are charity shops, which, according to Google, is 3 of each, but I'm pretty certain there's more than that. But anyway, times have changed. Going back to when I was a lad, which when I was 16 I actually had a real job, and I worked at Buckstones Motor Bodies for 6 months before I went to be a police cadet. And anyway, they took me to the betting shop at dinner time and I put 50p on, and like the day after I wanted to go again, and I was worried I was addicted, but fortunately I managed to get around that. But at that time, you know, in relation to betting shops, you couldn't, they couldn't sell you food, they couldn't sell you drink. I don't think you're even allowed to have a seat in it. Whereas if you, on the odd occasion that you do go in a betting shop now, they are, apparently, because I only go in on Grand National Day, they are quite plush. In actual fact, Grand National Day is the only day that I ever go in, and the first time I did go in was in 1994 when I bet on Freddie Starr's Mini Homer, which won at 14-1, so that was quite a good do. And I also won on the National Lottery on the first day, that was also in 1994, and I won the tenner on that, and funnily enough I met Mrs Gloucester in 1994, so she won the lottery. So, there we go. I don't think she got the bonus ball, though, but there we go. Anyway, but on a
you were doing ever so well till then, Chris.
On a serious point, nowadays, you know, we've just come back from Gran Canaria, and she was mourning because the only thing that you could get on the telly was football and 24-hour casino, which was just ridiculous. If you've got your iPhone, you'll get adverts flashing up for gambling, you know, on your iPad, on your computer, wherever. It is just targeting people all the time by all sorts of social media means. And in particular, the only thing I ever see in relation to help that people can receive is that phrase, when the fun stops, stop. And that is it. So changes do need to be made, because in particular, you know, this social media has no compunction on who it flashes up in front, and that means it flashes up in front of our young people, our children. So something needs to be done about it. What's currently being done about it is wholly inadequate, and the crux of our motion is to implement change via the Gambling Commission, recognise this local authority and other local authorities as responsible authorities, whereas they're not currently, more funding for the problem, and in particular from this council, more information from us, especially for our younger people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any member wish to speak on this? Okay, so all hands up. Who's? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. So that's carried. Motion 3. Councillor Williams is unable to attend the meeting. Williamson. Therefore, notice has been given in writing to Chief Executive. Councillor Heffernan will second the motion, and Councillor Williamson's absence if the Council agrees. Does the Council agree to this? Okay, thank you. Can I call on Councillor Murphy to move and Councillor Heffernan to second the motion, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Philip Schofield, Saran Jones and Siobhan Finneran, what have these people got in common? They're all born in Oldham. And I would like to see this motion investigated, which I believe will bring people in from the outside of Oldham and also Oldhamers to our town centre. You will no doubt be aware of Hollywood's Walk of Fame in California, where celebrities from the entertainment industry are honoured by having their names on stars on the floor. The Hollywood Walk of Fame comprises of more than 2,600 five-pointed terrazzo and brass stars embedded in the sidewalks, so that's footpath for us, along Hollywood Boulevard and surrounding streets in Hollywood, California. The stars are a permanent public monument to the achievement in the entertainment industry, bearing the names and mix of actors, musicians, directors, producers, musical and theatre groups, fictional characters and others, and it's a popular tourist destination with a reported 11 million visitors. I'd love to see something similar in Oldham in the entertainment quarter, at the side of the cinema perhaps, on a large open space. To get even more ambitious, you could look towards putting music-related stars outside the Lyceum, or anything health-related outside Oldham Hospital. I'm sure you get the idea. After a little research, I found some famous names that I were quite shocked about, actually, so I'll just rhyme a couple off for you. So Bobby Ball, one half of the double act Cannon and Ball, born in Boundary Park General Hospital. Christopher Biggins, television presenter, pantomime actor, and winner of 2007's I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Tommy Cannon, let's find another one. Bernard Cribbins, character and actor, a musical comedian. The one that I thought was really good, Jack Wilde, Royton-born Academy Award nominated actor, best known for his role as the Artful Dodger in the 1968 musical Oliver. Let's find some more. Sarah Lancashire, Oldham-born actress. Ralph Little, television actor, best known for his roles in The Royal Family and 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisp. Eric Longworth, a Shore-born actor, best known for his semi-regular part in sitcom Dad's Army as the town clerk of Warmington-on-Sea. So we have a number of famous people that I think should be celebrated. So I think we're missing a trick if we don't do something, and I'd like Council to investigate it, and I ask you to support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for the information regarding that. Councillor Heffernan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to second the motion. I'm not going to add too much to what Councillor Murphy has said. I think if you start looking back over quite a long period, the number of people from Oldham who have made fame and fortune in the entertainment industry is massive. And over the last 30, 40 years, our theatre workshop for young people has produced more and more people who have gone on to become well known and to become very good actors and actresses. They deserve their recognition. When we had an Oldham Chronicle, they occasionally got some recognition in there. We only have that now online. There's not a nice piece of paper to hold. So please support the motion. Let Oldham have its Walk of Fame. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to speak on this? Councillor Chuan, thank you.
I, in principle, oppose this. I'm not against Walk of Fame, but how do you describe fame is different. For me, the most famous people in Oldham will be who have been serving in Oldham to residents of Oldham for 60 years in Oldham Hospital, were a bin man who collects the bin for the last 50 years for the residents of Oldham, not an actor who was born in Oldham and left Oldham and not been in Oldham. So I will celebrate, I will support the fame of work, but for the residents of Oldham who served the residents of Oldham, made the difference in this town, adopted this town, lived in this town, brought their family in this town, and given their time and life and blood and sweat to this town. So those are the famous people for me. So based on those principles, I was strongly against this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Due to lack of time, we have to go back to Councillor Murphy to write a reply.
Disappointing. It's good enough for Hollywood. And I believe Birmingham Council's done it, so, you know, it's not beyond the wit of man to do. And it is celebrating the achievements of Oldhamers. So they are Oldham residents. Disappointing that you think that they're not and you don't want to celebrate them. There you go.
Okay, so can we go to the vote? Yeah. Does the council agree on the motion? So vote. Okay. All those against? Okay. So therefore, I declare the motion is lost. We'll move on to item agenda 14A. Minutes of joint authorities. Please note that I will call on spokespersons that were present at the meeting of the joint authorities to move the minutes as submitted. So, Greater Manchester Health and Care Board, Councillor Moores. Okay, who's going to move that? Councillor. So if we can note the minutes on that particular one. Greater Manchester Waste Disposal Authority, Councillor Hewitt. He's not here as well, so we'll just note the minutes on that. Transport of Greater Manchester, Councillor Alley. Greater Manchester Combined Authority, Councillor Fielding.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Police and Crime Panel, Councillor Brownridge. Thank you. National Parks Authority, Councillor McLaren. Thank you. Do any members of the Council have questions on these minutes? Okay, Councillor Heffernan, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is Greater Manchester Combined Authority. It's page 83 in the book, Green Book, and it's minute 6818 on the 29th of March. Greater Manchester Congestion Deal. This came up some years ago with the suggestion of a congestion charge, which was voted down at the time. Congestion has got much worse since. There was an item on North West Tonight a couple of weeks ago that showed the city centre, which was basically stationary. Does our representative, be Councillor Fielding, yes, are we looking to bring in a congestion charge, or is there at this moment no actual plan on the table?
Thank you, Councillor Heffernan, for your question. Can I ask the relevant Cabinet Member to reply back? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heffernan, for your question. You'll note that I wasn't present at that meeting because I was not a member of the Combined Authority on the date that took place, but I can confirm that since I have been appointed to the Combined Authority, there have been no discussions about introducing a congestion charge for Greater Manchester.
Thank you. Do any members of the Council have observations on the minutes? Councillor Sykes, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sorry, Sean, if you weren't at the meeting, I didn't quite clock that. Three quick observations. First of all, on page 80, Armed Forces Covenant and Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Conscious that's something we've debated in this chamber before now. This is at a GM level. I'm just wondering what are the implications for us as a local authority, and while I've read the minute a couple of times, I'm still less than clear what's going to change if we hadn't discussed and agreed that. So that's on page 80. I've then got on page 120.
Excuse me, Councillor Sykes, are you referring to an observation?
Yes.
I was referring to questions. Have you got any questions regarding?
No, we've done questions. He's replied. We're on observations, Mr Mayor. I'm right. Sorry. Not arguing with you. Page 120, bus reform objectives date, minute 11318. Again, welcome this minute. We all have problems with buses. I seem to spend half my life trying to chase them round or to get first to provide anything like an half reasonable service for our constituents. But I do notice that the last paragraph of that before resolved that local intelligence regarding gaps in the bus network is going to inform discussions with bus operators. And I'm just wondering how are we going to deliver that, and how is that going to be involved? Does it involve local members, and how are we going to pick that up here in Oldham as a local authority? And then the last one I couldn't let go, Mr Mayor, is top of page 120, which is the zonal fare structure on Metrolink, which, while in principle is welcome, we've got an opportunity to right a wrong and make sure all the stops in Oldham are in the same zone. because it cannot be right in my particular stop in Shaw and Crompton, and I'm sure you wouldn't wish it to be cheaper to go to Rochdale to shop in Rochdale Town Centre than it is to go to Oldham and shop in Oldham Town Centre. That's got to be wrong. You want us to be in the borough, deliver the message, right or wrong, and put us all in the same zone. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Could the relevant member reply back to this observation?
Yeah, I've never been quite clear on the difference between questions and observations if I'm asked to reply all the time, but I'll do it anyway. Armed Forces Covenant, the work that's been led on by Councillor Ball here in Oldham has been leading amongst other Greater Manchester authorities. So I wasn't present at this meeting that these minutes refer to, as I've stated, but I can say that we're in a strong position on that front, and if Greater Manchester's work can help strengthen what we do in that area, then that's all to be welcomed. On bus reform, this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine. The first campaign I ran as a backbencher was on the disparity between fares in the north and the south. But we don't just have a disparity between fares between First, who operate in the north, and Stagecoach, who operate in the south. We have a disparity in quality. The quality of local bus services in the north of Greater Manchester, and particularly in Oldham, because we have the highest proportion run by a single operator, is absolutely shocking. Even on the main corridor that runs across the end of my road that gets me to and from meetings here and in Manchester, it is not reliable. They regularly come in threes, and so there must be a mechanism by which members can inform the process of either franchising or partnership, whatever it is that the Combined Authority works at, and input that local intelligence that tells the Combined Authority what we expect from our bus service in terms of fares, frequency and routes. And I can confirm I will be championing that at Greater Manchester. Finally, on Metrolink zoning, I do agree with Councillor Sykes that we could potentially right a wrong here and include all of the stops within the borough of Oldham within Zone 3. I believe it's proposed because the rest are in Zone 3. But we do have to acknowledge in that regard that at the moment it is relatively more expensive to travel from Shaw towards Manchester than it is from the next stop in Durkas. So there will be revenue implications, and that will be the objection from TFGM. But I am perfectly happy to make the case because it does support our objectives to get more people into Oldham Town Centre. And one way to do that is to make it cheaper. So you got my support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hayes, Gloucester, you said you had an observation.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to an observation on the minutes of the GM Combined Authority, 25th of May 2018, page 113, and it's actually minute 105.18, paragraph 4, Greater Manchester Spatial Framework. Apparently we were told that this would be available following the local elections in May. It's now yet again been kicked into the long grass, and it's about time that we made a decision, particularly as this refers to building 3,000 properties in my ward. As it now won't be available until at least November, how confident are we as a council that there will not be any further delays with this framework?
Excuse me, Councillor Gloucester, this seems to be a question. Is we're looking
no,
at
it's just an
observations?
observation, seriously. And really, what I'm asking is, are we actually convinced that this is the right route for Oldham, bearing in mind the number of times it has been kicked into long grass?
Okay, thank you. Could the relevant cabinet member...
If considered appropriate.
Okay,
I can make an observation on the observation, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I was going to let it go as an observation, but I feel like I do need to respond. The spatial framework has by no means been kicked into the long grass. The consultation process has been delayed because of revised population estimates for Greater Manchester that mean that the demand for housing, employment land and all the other things that we're trying to allocate as part of that is not where we thought it was before. And so we want to make sure that if we're coming up with a plan that's going to set us up for the next 30 years, we're doing it based on the correct figures. And that is why it's been delayed, so we can So we allocate the houses that we need, the employment land that we need, and not any more or any less, because this is a plan that takes us to 2036 now, and when you've got something that looks that far ahead, you can't afford to get it wrong.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on swiftly to item agenda 14B, minutes of partnerships. I call on spokespersons of the partnerships to move, note the minutes as submitted. Oldham Leadership Board, Councillor Brownridge.
Move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Maya Care, Councillor Chouhan. Health and Wellbeing Board, Councillor Moores. He's not here, so we'll move that as it is. Or we'll note it. Do any members of the council have questions regarding these minutes? Thank you. Are you sure? Okay. Can I ask? There's no. Do any members of the council have any observations on these minutes? Okay, that's fine. Yep. Can I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Sykes to second the report? Update on action, Council.
Move, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Agreed, Mr Mayor.
Does anybody wish to speak? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I didn't get a chance to speak earlier on, so I thought I'll just bring this up. Page 172 is a response to my question regarding a speed limit on Manchester Road in Greenfield. Paragraph 2, reduction of a particular speed limit will not automatically result in drivers changing their behaviour. I'm sure it'll stop most drivers from driving at 40 to 30. The other thing on this report, there's no name, but I think the author is Gary Sutcliffe. I don't know, but I think the author's name should be on the report. The other point, a little bit further down, item 2, no signing options to reinforce the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. We all know if there's no signs on a road that the 30 mile an hour. If it says 20 or if it says 40. And the last one, just a little bit further down, please note any speed limits must be supported by the police. I got the support of the police before I brought this to council. So, Mr Mayor, I'm not happy with this report, and I would like to ask if we can send it back to Highways to have a re-look at the whole situation. We do know from a meeting in Saddleworth that signage and road markings are inadequate at this junction. This was confirmed by Mr Sutcliffe at this meeting. The approach to the junction from either side, Greenfield and Mosley, hides the junction, and the drivers only see a through road. They don't see the junction. And this junction needs resurfacing with coloured or rumble surfaces with better signage. So I'm not happy with this report and ask that it goes back to Highways, please.
Thank you very much. We'll get the appropriate director to have a look at that, and we will look into that.
Thank you.
So overall, does the council agree to the recommendations as detailed within the report? Thank you. Overview and scrutiny, annual report. I call on Councillor McLaren and to move, and Councillor Ahmed to second the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to move the report.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, cheers, Mr Mayor, thank you. It's a strange feeling, this, Mr Mayor, talking about overview scrutiny, because I've been thinking about it today. I think I've been the longest serving member, on overview scrutiny, since it started. When was it? 2004-ish, I think. So the period of time on the council, then I was on it. This next time I've got back on the council, I'm still on it, was on it, up until just recently because of my new position. I've got to say, though, Mr Mayor, the time on overview scrutiny, Liz has been there, Laurie's been there lots of times. The stuff that we've chin-wagged over, the details that we've dug into when we've opened the drawer and moved things around to collar officers and just see what they're really thinking about. Colin, Uncle Colin, this guy over here. We weren't keen on Colin at first when I got on that committee, I'll tell you, because I thought, this guy's too strict. Don't open your mouth unless you can do. You sit down and you put your hand up to speak. I thought, no. I've got to get in there and talk. But I'll tell you what, the way he's conducting himself, his stewardmanship of that committee is extraordinary. And he's stuck with it. There's loads of times you could have thought, forget it. And the other members that sat on it, the unusual cast of characters that we've had, Diane Williamson, Kath Ball, Deanie, Peter Dean, oh my God, and all these other people, but they stuck with it and tried to get to grips with what's going on. From my own point of view, Mr. Mayor, it's a bit sad because I always thought to be on there forever. When I got this new, very privileged position that I'm in now, I thought I could still probably stick with it, but I can't, and that's fine. However, just want to pay tribute to Colin in this committee, because those guys, over all those years, have done an outstanding job. But one person has said something more than anybody else that's made me think about it. It's an officer, I won't tell you the name. And the attorney said, Stephen, you do some good stuff on there, but there's lots and lots of other stuff you could be digging into. There's lots of other stuff you could need to find out about. So really, as overviewing scrutiny, I'm chewing under Colin. A little. Will it get a lot better? If that guy sticks with it, it will. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well said. Thank you very much. Does the Council agree to the recommendations detailed within the report? Agreed. Thank you. Appointment of independent persons and independent members to the Standards Committee and Independent Remuneration Panel. I call on Councillor Fielding to move and Councillor Sykes to second. Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Are you sure? Okay. Does the Council agree to the recommendations? Thank you. This concludes the meeting for today. Thank you very much.